All right, welcome to the conversation. Now we're going to have on a really great reporter, and I critique the mainstream media all the time, and every once in a while when I do that, I tell you, but they have great reporters and they do write great stories from time to time. This is one of them. So Craig Whitlock has won almost every award, a finalist 3 times for the Pulitzer Prize, and he wrote the book, The Afghanistan Papers: A Secret History of the War. It's particularly relevant now. So Craig, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
No problem. So, I was greatly frustrated by the coverage throughout the withdrawal on cable news. And the reason was because they seem to have collective amnesia, partly about your story, that the Pentagon had been basically lying to us the whole time, and they made it seem like, oh, it's Joe Biden's fault. He's the one that created this mess. Okay, so hence I ask you, the Pentagon had been telling us that they were doing nation building the whole time and it was going swimmingly. Did they not believe that themselves?
Well, that's exactly right. In the documents I obtained for the Afghanistan Papers coverage in the Washington Post and in the book that's just come out, there's interview after interview with US Army officials, with administration officials from Bush's term to Obama and up to Trump, where particularly with the building of the Afghan army and Afghan paramilitary police, that people didn't have any faith in the Afghan security forces from the get-go, that despite more than $85 billion that the United States spent to build up the Afghan army and police, there was real fear all along that this enormous army and police force wouldn't be able to stand up to the Taliban, even though the Taliban were a bunch of guerrillas, much poorly equipped compared to the Afghans. Just all those years, people were worried that the Afghan army would fall apart like a house of cards. And this is what we saw happen in the last weeks of August before the Taliban took over.
So, but as I was reading your material, Craig, I thought, did they even know what they were trying to do? Because a lot of the officials, even the defense secretaries, Rumsfeld, Gates, etc., it didn't seem like they had a good sense of what they were trying to accomplish. So, okay, Taliban gave shelter to Al-Qaeda. We drive Al-Qaeda out of Afghanistan fairly quickly. Taliban offers to surrender. We don't take the surrender, which is insane. And then 10 years later, we finally get Bin Laden. And at that point, what are we doing? Did they know what we were doing? What were they trying to accomplish?
Well, this is the fundamental question. What were we trying to accomplish for most of the last 20 years, but particularly the last 10 since Bin Laden was killed? As you correctly pointed out, the original mission, the whole purpose in the beginning back in 2001 was pretty well understood by the American people and was articulated by the Bush administration, that the whole point was to go after Al-Qaeda, was to defend the United States from another terrorist attack and make sure that Al-Qaeda couldn't strike again. And that was largely accomplished within the first 6 months. Al-Qaeda's leaders were either captured, killed, or had fled Afghanistan. So then the question becomes, what now? And understandably, Afghanistan was in terrible shape. This was a devastated country. It was racked by hunger, refugees. It needed to be rebuilt. So there was some responsibility here to try and stabilize the country and try and help rebuild it. But the problem was neither Bush nor Obama or Trump, quite frankly, could really articulate to the American people what exactly they were trying to do and at what point it would be okay to leave. So the war kind of dragged on and people let it drift. And part of the reason it dragged on was there was this fear that this Afghan state we had built up from scratch wouldn't be able to defend itself. And so we just kept staying longer and hoping things would change, but they never really did until Biden came in and said, enough.
So Craig, I have a different theory. So your material lays out deep incompetence, and honestly, all the way up the chain, from contractors to the military to the presidents. I mean, when I see the decisions Barack Obama made, I think, didn't you ask the generals, what are you trying to accomplish? Well, at what point do we accomplish it? Give me metrics. How do we measure it? How do we know that we've won? When do I leave, right? And he just he didn't either have the competence or the courage to ask those questions. And so I'm not laying it on Obama, Trump, and Cheney, and Bush, and Rumsfeld were all at fault. They all did it together. They all made the same mistakes. And of course, Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld were the worst because they were offered bin Laden on a platter. They were offered the Taliban on a platter. They just wouldn't take it. So, which then actually leads to my other question, Craig, which is, my other theory is just corruption, that the generals almost all retire and work for defense contractors. So I don't know that they actively, consciously said, oh, the longer we stay, the richer I get afterwards. But they do know they're gonna get the money from the defense contractors. And we didn't all lose. The defense contractors made a tremendous amount of money. They way outperformed the stock market, and nobody ever talks about it. So do you think that's a factor?
Well, that's something that's understandable. A lot of people have frustration with, right? That we see that the United States spent over $2 trillion in Afghanistan over the last 20 years, and what is there to show for it right now? Not a whole lot. The Afghan army and police and the Afghan government have gone up in a puff of smoke. We see all these weapon systems that were left that the Taliban have taken. I think there was a real attempt to try and help build up Afghanistan with roads, clinics, schools, things like that. But this, like you said, there was a lot of incompetence involved. But in regards to people profiting, there were a lot of people profiting through the war. Defense contractors, not just American ones, but international ones, Afghan contractors, and in particular our allies in the Afghan government. And this was a real flaw in our whole strategy, was we were feeding the corruption in Afghanistan because we were spending more money than that country could absorb. So particularly during Obama's term in office, he's trying to rush through this strategy of his to build up the Afghan state. So we threw more money there than the Afghans knew what to do with. So a lot of it ended up in the pockets of contractors, but also Afghan officials, the warlords who we had brought into the government. So there wasn't much incentive for our Afghan allies to change. There wasn't much incentive for them to try and negotiate with the Taliban, because they would only lose power if they came to some sort of reconciliation, and they might lose a lot of the money that was lying in their pockets that was coming from Washington. So there were people across the board who were profiting from the status quo. And that is, I think, a fair reason why things persisted as long as they did.
Yeah, look, when your best case scenario is our military is deeply incompetent and couldn't get anything done in 20 years, and our leaders are so buffoonish that they couldn't even ask simple questions like, what are we trying to accomplish? And that's our best case scenario, because the worst case scenarios, they're halfway doing it on purpose because of corruption. It's not a good place to be, which then, Craig, leads me to the next question, which is about the press. I'm really curious your take on what you saw over the last couple of weeks. So were there problems with the withdrawal? Of course there were, right? But it seemed to me like they were all trying to make it seem like, oh, if we just stayed longer, it would have worked out, which is absolute insanity. We don't need to discuss that. But as you watch it, are you frustrated at the collective amnesia as they constantly point to Biden and ignore your reporting on all the mistakes that the military made?
Yeah, well, look, I want to be careful. I don't want to defend Biden. I think the evacuation wasn't well planned. I think his administration thought this would be a more orderly process. They thought the Afghan government would stand on its own 2 feet for at least a few more months. So I don't want to let him off the hook at the end. But you're right, the collective amnesia is pretty striking. And I think you correctly point out that the number of people who said, oh, he should have just kept troops there, everything would have been fine. It would have been like in South Korea or Germany, where we could stay indefinitely and troops wouldn't get killed and we'd stabilize things. That's just a false reading of what was going on. The only reason the Taliban hadn't been attacking the US military over the last year and a half is because Trump had cut this deal with them where he said, I'm gonna pull out US forces. The 2 things you have to do is not attack our troops and renounce Al-Qaeda. So the Taliban, of course, wants the US to leave. So they're like, sure, we won't, if you promise to leave, we're not gonna attack US troops anymore. But if Biden had flipped that decision, if he said, okay, we're gonna stay, we're gonna send more troops back, there's no question that the violence would have gotten worse, that we would have been dragged deeper into a conflict. Because over the last several years, the Taliban has gradually been getting stronger and stronger. They have more fighters, under their command than they did back in 2001 when we first won the war. So if we had stayed, we had to be prepared that Afghanistan the violence levels were just going to pick up even more.
So we have time for one quick question, but everybody read the Afghanistan papers because it's real reporting, gets you actual facts. So Craig, we have this absurdity of they say, oh, it's like South Korea, as if we're welcomed by the Afghan people. If we were so welcome, why did the Afghan government lose in 11 days? So which leads me to the final question. Do you have any sense of what the Afghan people actually wanted?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, there's not a simple answer, but because in Kabul is very different from the rest of the country, and we just haven't had very good news coverage outside of Kabul for one reason, because it's not safe. The Taliban had control of the rural parts of the country. But I think that one thing is clear in news coverage, and one theme that is consistent is the Afghan people are tired of war.
All right, Craig Whitlock, the author of Afghanistan Papers: A Secret History of War, Thank you so much for joining us, Craig. Really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you. Really appreciate it, Cenk.
Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show. Now,
We'll see.
Poor Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy. Everyone should be lucky enough to have a John Iadarola in their life.
You confused everyone.
Okay, sorry. I thought it was pretty clear.
Take a break now.
You can turn me into Dr. Manhattan as long as I get what Dr. Manhattan's packing, okay?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
Emilio D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Iadarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Gun, baby.
You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast.
That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
I hope that, who they choose for the White House isn't just a borderline Klansman. That's all we gotta hope.
That's it. We will settle it.
She's cute. I didn't say that about Laura Ingraham.
Scandal at TYT. Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't.
You're a good boss.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip into Republicans. See, don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
What's happening? I'm Dr. Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey. Here's the bottom line. I play no games about policy, period. Too many people's lives are at stake. So here's what I do. I challenge conservative ideology that hinders the growth of this country. I make sure we place our facts in proper context, and I have no problem debating anyone on a position that I have. Progressives have the ideas to change the world, but when you really look at it, progressives have always change this world for the better. I want you to tune into my new show, Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, right here on the TYT network, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'll see you there.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change. All right, back on the conversation. Now joining us, our own managing editor, Jonathan Larson. He broke a story today about how Mike Lindell got radicalized by a group called The Family. They run the National Prayer Breakfast. It's got so many different components at it of the story, including Mike Lindell himself yelling at Jonathan. So that's a fun part of the story. Jonathan, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start with Lindell. I honestly did not know until I read your story that he was not always evangelical. So tell us how he got to be the way that he is.
So it's as you alluded to, it's a complicated, kind of amazing story. He in 2014 met Stephen Baldwin, the Christian actor. What we found out was that a year before Lindell met Stephen Baldwin, Stephen Baldwin had set up a nonprofit called Friends of Stephen Baldwin Ministry, and the three principles of that nonprofit were all tied to some extent to the family. That's the secretive religious group based in Washington that has people around the world that also runs the National Prayer Breakfast. So some of those people who were in Stephen Baldwin's orbit, based on tax filings we ended up finding and business records, things like that, some of those same family folks ended up connected to Lindell. And in 2016, Lindell told me at the last minute he was invited to that year's prayer breakfast. And at that year's prayer breakfast, he had a number of experiences which, in his own words, began to set him on a path towards where he is now. He describes himself roughly prior to 2015 or so as apolitical. He literally says in his book, I didn't know the difference between a Republican and a Democrat. And he's like, yeah, I guess I'm Christian. Sure, why not? And he had a number of experiences that were facilitated by members of the family, including 1 year after the prayer breakfast, someone he appears to have met at the prayer breakfast who ended up on his board. This was on his nonprofit board. This was a guy who was on the board of the family. The family's legal entity is called the Fellowship Foundation. This guy was a PR guy who's on that board, now both boards, Lindell and the family's, and he's literally the spokesperson for the family. He suggests that Lindell go to this sort of like a retreat. It's like a program for military veterans who are suffering PTSD. And they use Christ. They use Jesus, accepting Jesus as your savior. That's part of how they bring peace and comfort to these. It's called Restored Warrior, Operation Restored Warrior, and they talk about the pain that they've experienced. And in Lindell's book, in his own words, I should say, I don't recall if it's in the book, he says, I did a complete surrender. I fell to my knees. The guy running the program had ties to the family, and it was the family board member who suggested that he attend this program. And so they essentially engineered, might be slightly too strong a word, but maybe not, engineered this guy's political radicalization. They talked at the prayer breakfast. Lindell describes in his book how the prayer breakfast leadership wanted him, actually this is a separate source who told me this, Ben Carson's former campaign manager at the time, told me that the NPB, the prayer breakfast leadership, specifically requested that Carson and Lindell be brought together. And during that prayer session meeting, Lindell writes in his book, he began to understand, his eyes were opened, and everyone in the room agreed that the upcoming 2016 election would either take America down a path of renewal or further down the dark path that it had already been on after kicking God out of the public square. So all of these things were inculcated in Lindell at the prayer breakfast meeting, which the Carson campaign manager told me the prayer breakfast leadership wanted to happen. And as Lindell says in his book, everyone in that prayer breakfast group, this is a little side group off to the side of the main event, after the main event, they all agreed that it was either a spiritual renewal or a dark path, which means everyone in that room was maybe not a Trump fan yet because he was not yet the nominee, but they certainly were on the Republican side, the evangelical right-wing Christian Republican side.
So Jonathan, it's a funny question to ask from a guy who was screamed at by Mike Lindell a couple of days ago. But as I read the story and we talked about it on the Young Turks, I thought this guy has kind of a childlike innocence. It seems like that the family, which by the way is that National Prayer Breakfast attended by Republicans and Democrats, Obama, the Clintons, and so tons of Democrats still go to and validate this group that spawned Mike Lindell in a sense. It looked like they hoodwinked Lindell and they did it for the big pillow money.
So the big pillow money, right? So it's very hard to divine motive, no pun intended. But we did find that. Well, I had a source close to the family who told me that the people who had been in Stephen Baldwin's orbit and then ended up close to Lindell, at least one of them did, that they were sort of known for using the breakfast to try to reel in folks who might become their patrons, who they didn't necessarily have that Jesus relationship with yet, and had it a little backwards. The breakfast is supposed to celebrate that relationship, at least in the family's thinking. That's not necessarily how the public sees this event.
Before we run out of time, which we're very close to, you called Mike Lindell, as a normal reporter would, to get confirmation on some of these facts. And
I actually sent a bunch of emails to My Pillow, which is like the only contact information for these various entities he has. And then he ended up emailing me and asking for my number. So he ended up calling me.
Okay, got you. He calls you and you're asking for confirmation of things, again, like anybody would. Where does it break down and when does he start screaming at you and why?
So one of the emails that we sent to My Pillow, which was actually not really about him. So I was taken aback because I didn't understand what he was talking about because we had sent lengthy questions about him. One of the questions about someone else at his company, he accused me of lying about, and he was right that we got it wrong in the email. I got it wrong in the email, but of course that's why you send these emails is to check and make sure that the parties involved have a chance to say, no, actually that's wrong. I think he took it as proof that I was going to lie and make stuff up. And then it was interesting because then, I asked him, so he was calling me, I'm not even sure if I can say the words on the air, but anyway.
Yeah, no, we said it, lying scumbag.
Yes, scumbag was repeated, pawn scum I think was in there, liar, where do you get these lies, stuff like that. So he, at one point, I said something like, can you explain to me how you got invited to the 2016 National Prayer Breakfast? And again, he was like, see, where do you come up with this stuff? I wasn't at the 2016 Prayer Breakfast. To which I responded, you write in your book that you had conversations there about the upcoming 2016 election. And he's like, oh yeah, all right. And then I asked him about this guy who ended up running his foundation, president of his foundation, and I said, you paid him $55,000. And he said, where do you get these lies? And I responded, it's your own nonprofit's tax filings. So it seems to me possible that, and he even told me at some point, like, we haven't done anything with the foundation for 4 years. Well, after that 4-year period, more recently than that 4-year period, there have still been people from the family involved with the nonprofit, and money has been going to evangelical causes. So it's hard for me not to wonder if he hadn't hung up, whether we would have found out that maybe he wasn't aware of some of the things his own foundation was doing. He seems to have thought it was defunct. They've continued filing tax filings, disclosing revenues, paying expenses, making distributions, all of that stuff. So someone's doing something with it.
Yeah, I mean, if he has a rational bone left in his body, he might want to look at how they're spending his money at his foundation, and he might find out some interesting things hidden under that pillow. All right, and TYT.com, go to Investigates. Jonathan, you want to give a quick shout out to some folks who helped you on the story?
Yeah, our news assistant, Zoltan Lucas, and our intern, Jamia Zarzuela, both just absolutely stepped up. As you know, we were kind of racing to get these stories out so that people would have them in time for Labor Day, and you guys would have them in time for the show. So they totally stepped up, and I just wanted to acknowledge that.
That's awesome. All right, Jonathan Larson, managing editor for TYT Investigates. Thank you. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time. welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. Hope you had a great Labor Day weekend. So a lot of Americans did not because their benefits got cut off. We're going to tell you about all that in a second. And Michael Moore is going to be on the show today. So he'll be on in the second hour. Talk a little bit about 9/11, Afghanistan, and other aspects of our endless wars. So great to have him on the program. And hilarious news about ivermectin. Yes, that apparently exists, and we will share it with you guys. Casper.
Well, I think we should start off with Senator Lindsey Graham and why he was trending over the weekend. He had some strong predictions regarding our foreign policy in Afghanistan, so let's take it away.
We will be going back into Afghanistan as we went back into Iraq and Syria.
Senator Lindsey Graham, who is heavily funded by the defense industry, is itching to reinvade Afghanistan following Biden's withdrawal of US troops. In fact, here's more of his conversation with BBC host Stephen Sackur.
The Taliban are not reformed, they're not new. They have a view of the world out of sync with modern times. They're going to impose a lifestyle on the Afghan people that I think is going to make us all sick to our stomach. But most importantly, they're going to give safe haven to Al-Qaeda, who has ambitions to drive us out of the Mideast writ large and attack us because of our way of life. We will be going back into Afghanistan as we went back into Iraq and Syria.
Hang on, are you seriously think the United States will once again, in a foreseeable future, put troops back into Afghanistan?
We'll have to, because the threat will be so large. Why did we go back to Syria and Iraq? Why do we have 5,000 troops in Iraq today? Because of the caliphate rising, projecting force outside of Iraq, killing Americans, killing the French, attacking the British. So yes, it will be a cauldron for radical Islamic behavior. You cannot deal with this over the horizon.
What's fascinating about Senator Lindsey Graham and the statements that he makes there, the clear fear-mongering about how Americans will be targeted and murdered, is that he also simultaneously minimizes right-wing violence in this country. He consistently minimizes what happened in the nation's capital on January 6th. But more importantly, if you look at the impact of these multiple tours in places like Afghanistan, like Iraq, our soldiers have been suffering with all sorts of mental health issues, which they then bring home, and unfortunately, in some cases, ends up in violence against people around them. In fact, there was a story just this weekend about a sharpshooter from the Marines in Florida, and he decided to, suffering from severe PTSD. I'm not minimizing or trying to excuse what he did, but he opened fire and randomly killed 4 members of one family in Polk County, Florida, okay, including a 33-year-old mother and her 3-month-old child. And we just abandon our troops here in the United States once they come back from those multiple tours. But Lindsey Graham isn't actually worried about Americans dying. He's not worried about these alleged threats. He's worried about appeasing the defense contractors who have given him more than $1 million over the lifetime of his political career. And I'll give you specific figures in just a second, but Cenk, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so he talked about the Taliban's terrible. They don't agree with our way of life, and they want to take away some of our rights. I assume he means the ones in Afghanistan, not the ones in Texas, but the ones in Texas actually do take away our rights. The Taliban can't take away our women's rights at all, but the Taliban in America, the one that Lindsey Graham subscribes to, Christian fundamentalists, can and do take away our rights. And so if he's talking about how Americans are affected, they're affected a lot more by the actions of Governor Greg Abbott in Texas than they are of Rashid Dostum or Gulbuddin Hekmatyar or anyone in Afghanistan. So that's a reality, and that's a reality that's uncomfortable for him. But for a lot of Christian fundamentalists, they think, yes, our fundamentalism imposed upon you is a great idea. You shouldn't have that kind of sex, you shouldn't have those rights, we should get control over your bodies. Oh, they want to do their fundamentalism based on very similar laws, but just with a different name. Oh, that is unacceptable. Only we get to abuse our women, not them. That's Lindsey Graham's position. Honestly, that's the neoconservative position, but I can't say that it's entirely the Republican Party's position because the Republican voters do not agree with him.
Correct.
They are overwhelmingly against the war, and further interference in other people's affairs.
In fact, there was a poll done just last week by the Washington Post and ABC. And here's what they found. They found that 77% of Americans say that they support the decision to withdraw all US forces from Afghanistan, of course. Support crosses party lines with 88% of Democrats and 74% of Republicans and 76% of independents aligned behind the decision. So Lindsey Graham's views on the necessity to invade Afghanistan is very much out of step with his own voters, his own constituents. And by the way, later in the interview, he also said this. He said, Afghanistan will be a cauldron for radical Islamic behavior, presenting the United States with only two options. You can say that's no longer my problem, or hit them before they hit you. And it's just amazing because he's just recycling the same fear-mongering tactics that were used in the lead up to that war. And also the lies that were told right before we invaded Iraq in that preemptive war.
Yeah, hit them before they hit you is the most common statement before someone starts a terrible war. By the way, you know who said hit them before they hit you? Adolf Hitler. Now, you could say, hey, Hitler said a lot of things and you shouldn't compare anyone to Hitler. I hear you on that, but I'm not doing it to say Lindsey Graham is the same as Hitler. I'm doing it so you understand it's the oldest trick in the book. He said, oh my God, we've got to protect the homeland. It's literally what Hitler said. And we've got to hit them in the Sudetenland, in Poland, in Russia, in all these places before they hit us. They're coming to hit us, those poor ethnic Germans, they're coming for us, so we've got to hit them first. So whenever you hear somebody talking about all they understand is violence, that's why we have to murder them before they even do anything, understand that they're the actual murderers.
Now, if you look at what really motivates Lindsey Graham, because he knows that the Taliban doesn't really pose a threat to Americans. In fact, if you take troops, you put them back in Afghanistan, that does risk their lives, right? So what really motivates him? What's the motivating factor behind his statements there? Well, I implied that he's trying to appease his defense contractors, and that's very much real. If you look at the entirety of his career and the top sectors that have contributed campaign donations to him, you'll see that in that list, in the top 5 is the defense sector. And by the way, I want to make clear that this is just the money that we know about. There's also dark money pouring into campaigns, which makes it kind of difficult to decipher just how much money these sectors have actually given him. But of the money that we know about that isn't dark money, over the lifetime of his career, he has received over $1,007,328.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
And guys, look at the line right after that, energy and natural resources. It gets ranked in a funny kind of way here, but it's actually bigger than defense. It's over 2.5 million in his career. But those guys also greatly benefit from wars in the Middle East, because when you have instability in oil-rich countries like Iraq and Iran, what that does is it drives up prices. Because they're worried about supply, and even if demand stays the same, prices naturally go up. So that's 2 out of his top 5 giant donors, over $1 million, as you saw in those sheets there, that are heavily incentivized to create more wars in the Middle East. Now, a lot of our mainstream media is in the brainwashing business, and they brainwash you into thinking that giant global corporations like oil companies and defense contractors are not interested in profits. They're just benign charities, and they give the politicians like Lindsey Graham $2.5 million, $1 million, etc., just for charity, because they believe in the same principles as he does. No, they're purchasing a politician, and what they are buying is the product of war. And you create the war, we supply it, we get rich, and we take some of the small amount of that and funnel it back to you. This is the cycle of corruption. Now, what's really disheartening is a perfectly fine interview, and obviously the interviewer there challenged Lindsey Graham when he said such an outrageous thing like we're going back. But what no reporter ever challenges them on is, hey, Lindsey Graham, why should we listen to you given that you've taken millions of dollars from people who profit from these wars? Isn't it obvious that you're literally making a killing out of these wars? And so you would seem to be the least reliable source here, given how heavily incentivized you are to start more wars. You literally get more checks every time you start more wars. So you would be the worst person to interview, not the best on this issue. Isn't that correct, Senator Graham? But no one ever asked that because you don't ever want to offend the elite because they actually rule this country, and reporters know their roles. Their role is to do propaganda on behalf of the powerful.
That's right. All right, well, let's take a look at policy back at home where, unfortunately, some of the benefits regarding COVID have run out. So, enhanced federal unemployment benefits have expired. In fact, they expired over the weekend, on Labor Day specifically, which means that millions of Americans will not get the expanded benefits even as coronavirus is surging, even as businesses are not operating at full capacity, even as millions of Americans are still without jobs. Now, to remind you all, the added benefits, federal benefits, amounted to an additional $300 per week on top of the state unemployment benefits. But the expiration date, reached on Monday, means that 7.5 million people will lose their benefits entirely, and another 3 million will lose the $300 weekly supplement. Now, what has Biden said? Well, as you can imagine, there hasn't been much pushback from Biden or any urgency from Biden to provide an extension of these benefits. In fact, Biden has called on certain states, those with high unemployment rates and a willingness to continue aid to jobless workers, to use state relief funds from the March law, the COVID relief bill, to help the long-term unemployed. So far, no state, of course, has said it plans to do so. Roughly half of the states, nearly all of them led by Republican governors, moved to cut off benefits early on their own. Biden and his administration did not fight them. In fact, the Biden administration has now pivoted toward passing his agenda, both the bipartisan infrastructure bill and allegedly the reconciliation budget bill that includes all of the provisions that would actually help keep American families afloat. Now, to be quite honest with you, maybe he's fighting behind the scenes, but I personally haven't seen much of a fight from the Biden administration in regard to the reconciliation bill. But nonetheless, this is not a good day for Americans who are still searching for work. And of course, there's a huge misconception in regard to what those unemployment benefits did to the alleged labor shortage that we're experiencing. So Cenk, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so this affects a ton of people. 7.5 million people get cut off now. Another 3 million lose an extra $300 they were able to get. Another 3 million had lost it earlier, a couple of weeks ago, or some time ago. So combined, that's nearly 14 million Americans that are losing benefits. So this is going to have a massive impact. But look, the Biden administration is clear. They're not looking to extend it at all. It's not, they're not even pretending on this one. A lot of times they, oh golly gee, we would love to continue the eviction moratorium, but all of our real estate donors say we can't. I mean, the courts say we can't, probably, maybe, if we help them. Okay, so in this one, they're not even trying. They're like, no, we're gonna end this. We don't want you to extend it. By the way, so the red states are the ones that took away the unemployment benefits earlier, and Biden didn't object. But now the blue states are not petitioning to use them either. They're not using the extensions at all. So everyone agrees, including Democratic governors, et cetera. So, and by the way, at some point, I would agree with, well, okay, maybe we should pare things back when we get back to normal and healthy. Do we look like we're back to normal and healthy?
Nope.
So that's the giant but here. Okay, there's two aspects of it. One, the Delta variant really threw us for a loop, including myself. Like, I thought we were past it. I was ecstatic. I was even going indoors in some places without masks, being vaccinated, et cetera. But now here comes a giant surge, and now we're back to masked up and affecting businesses and their ability to hire. The unemployment numbers are not good recently. And so the second but is these business owners, as Anna's about to show you, that are beginning to say finally what's true. It turns out if you pay enough unemployment insurance, people can squeak by, and then they realize how terrible their jobs were. And then you have to actually pay them a living wage to get them to show up to work. And man, businesses do not want to do that. And in fact, there's one business owner flat out admitting it, but he says he represents a lot of people. Fox News says he represents a lot of people. And in the business community, unfortunately, it's true. He's like, damn it, I don't want to pay living wages. We had him exactly where we wanted him, barely hanging on by a thread.
Right, I mean, in a situation where workers had absolutely no leverage, but with unemployment benefits, they have a little bit of leverage, but there is still a misconception about what motivates workers to avoid going back to some of the jobs they had. I'll get to that in detail in just a moment, but first, I bring you Jason Kramer, the owner of the Doo-Wop Drive-In, who admits that, all right, I guess I'm just gonna have to pay people a living wage, whereas before I was paying them starvation wages.
Here's the thing that people get mistaken because of what we stand for. We're okay for giving people assistance that need it. This was way too much money for way too long. The issue is the money that was given out was for help, not to stay home and do nothing. I couldn't even get people to walk in the door to even explain to them, listen, I'm willing to compromise and give you a living wage, give you a working wage, not just minimum wage, but I wasn't even given the opportunity to help people get jobs. It is strictly about capitalism. I took the risk. I put my life on the line. I put everything, I worked hard, but I was willing to even share my wealth, the minimum that we were making with the employees, but I couldn't get people even in the door. You have all these statistics saying, well, all these millions of people want jobs. Where are they at? Where were they?
No, I love that, because it's like, I wasn't given the opportunity to pay my workers a living wage. I couldn't even get them through that. It's interesting because there's already data showing that for the employers who were willing to up the wages of workers during the pandemic, they had a far easier time getting their workers to come back. Now, there are other factors at play that actually have a much larger influence on workers' decisions to stay home, and I'll get to that in just a second. But Cenk, I just love the admission there.
Yeah.
Like, I would have paid them a living wage, I just didn't get the opportunity.
Yeah, so there's two things that I love about that. One is the lies, and two is the truth. So first, the lies. He's like, I want to give it to them, but they wouldn't take it. They wouldn't walk in the door. Yeah, I was in Colorado a couple of months back, and that's when things were coming back into business before the Delta variant. And the fast food chains had big signs in front, $15 an hour. I saw one that said $18 an hour. Okay, and guess what? They were functioning, they were open because people saw those signs and they walked in because $18 an hour sounded pretty damn good. Okay?
Strange how that works, Cenk. Weird.
Yeah. Meanwhile, this poor guy, he doesn't know how to put a sign in front of his establishment.
He didn't get an opportunity.
He didn't get an opportunity to put up a sign.
He worked so hard.
He
put everything on the line.
My dad was a local businessman. He was a pretty good businessman. You know what he would do? He'd put an ad in the paper. You could have done that. Oh, I didn't get a chance. Okay, I'm pretty sure you did. But look at you, you have a chance to say it on Fox News here. Tell people what you're paying. And I guarantee you they'll show up in droves if it's a good number, right? So that's the lies. The truth though is even more amazing. He's like, I was willing to compromise and pay them a living wage. Oh, were you? Well, are you not merciful? I didn't know you were that much of a humanitarian. So apparently before you weren't willing to compromise and pay them a living wage. Okay, and he views that to be a compromise. Come on, I'm even letting you live off my wages and you're still complaining? Jesus. And then the second admission, I was even willing to share my wealth. Again, quite the humanitarian you are.
Right.
Well, you see, when people work with you and you all make the money together, yes, in a manner of speaking, you should share the wealth, and in a way that will motivate them to come to work and maybe even create an atmosphere where you like each other, right? And that you have a functioning business. It doesn't mean they're gonna make more than you. It doesn't mean you're not gonna make plenty. But yes, you're supposed to share enough for people to show up to work. That's the bare minimum. And he views it as like I'm such a good guy. I'll even pay you guys minimum wage and share my wealth a little bit. No, that's not what makes you a good guy.
So let's talk about why workers aren't going back to work, right? Because I think that there's this, and this always happens, the smearing of American workers as lazy, as bums, as people who just want to sit on the couch, when in reality, you look at productivity in this country, before the pandemic, and Americans work the longest hours, incredibly hard workers, incredibly productive, but we're just all bums. Okay, great. But evidence so far suggests that programs are playing at most a limited role in keeping people out of the workforce. States that ended the benefits early, for example, meaning the unemployment benefits, have seen little, if any, pickup in hiring relative to the rest of the country. So one of the main things that gets cited is childcare. Because remember, the coronavirus pandemic, whether we want to believe it or not, is still raging. So what ends up happening to kids who are supposed to go back to school? Well, they go back to school, there's an outbreak of coronavirus, and a bunch of students have to quarantine, meaning that their parents need to be home to take care of their children. Right? Childcare is incredibly expensive. Most people can't afford it. So there's a cost-benefit analysis that happens in every household. It ends up being that the mother is better off staying at home with the kids instead of working all day to just pay all of her earnings toward childcare, right? So data released by the Labor Department showed that the states that cut benefits have experienced job growth similar to, and perhaps slightly slower than, growth in states that retained the benefits. That was true even in the leisure and hospitality sector, where businesses have been particularly vocal in their complaints about the benefits. So that's the thing. I mean, people in this country get no support at all. So if we're not gonna get help with childcare, how are you gonna expect workers who make meager wages to show up to work when all of their wages then get spent on childcare? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. This system is broken. And to smear workers as like these lazy bums is so disgusting, when in reality, you've got greedy businesses that don't want to pay a living wage. You have the government that's unwilling to do anything about childcare and the lack of a social safety net. And this is the situation that we end up in, period. This is the way it works.
Yeah, see, that's why I thought the Family Paid Leave Act, et cetera, would be easier to pass, because at some point corporations have to realize if we don't help women with, and not just women, of course, but families, predominantly women still today, with childcare, they're not going to come to work. And then, by the way, it's not just that, hey, I don't have enough employees. What that'll do is it lowers the supply of workers, which drives up the prices. And so they don't want that either. So it's a perfect opportunity to unload that on the government. And so that's why it was easily put into the COVID relief bills. But I believe it's in the $3.5 trillion reconciliation
Correct.
bill.
It is.
And so that should be a way to sweeten the pot for corporations who actually, of course, run our government. But still, that one has trouble passing. And you would think that that should be a layup for them. But still to this day, they think, well, I mean, I'm gonna have to pay a part of that cost. And look at that, the guy on Fox News really there almost negotiating with the country, right? How little can we pay you for you to show up? That's what they're trying to find, your bottom. And
yeah,
and
he's not the only one though.
Yeah, and no, the whole country is,
yes,
right? All of the politicians are. He just happens to be symbolic. He's actually a small business owner, so not a great symbol. The real symbol should be the giant corporations that hire fast food workers, et cetera. And they're the ones that methodically try to keep your wages to scientifically as low as they possibly can pay, and for you to still be able to survive.
All right, we got to take a break, but when we come back, the Justice Department claims that it is in the fight against Texas to protect women and their reproductive rights. We'll see what they're gonna do. We'll give you those statements and more when we come back.
All right, first we go to member section as usual. I Am Sock writes in about Lindsey Graham's idea to reinvade Afghanistan. Nobody has any good ideas for sequels anymore. Agreed. It's funny. What's the antimatter? Writes in. Republicans have a view of the world that is out of touch with modern times. Exactly. Of course, that's what Lindsey Graham said about the Taliban, but unfortunately also true of Republicans. And I love the handle, what's the antimatter? All right, Ian writes in, by his logic, should the US send troops to Texas to protect our way of life? Ian, whether it's great minds or not, we think alike. As you saw me make the same point later in the program. Mickey C, the silver-haired dragon writes in, we have to hit them before they hit us. Does he understand that means we should attack Saudi Arabia before they hit us again? That's another great point, Mickey, and of course that would be inconvenient because that would affect some of those energy donors also on Lindsey Graham's campaign list. But if we had a single decent reporter in the country, they would ask all these questions. Warta Dragon writes, who wants to work for someone like that? Referring to the business owner on Fox News. No wonder you can't get people to work for them. It's another good point. If you're constantly yelling at your employees, saying, look, man, I'm willing to compromise with you. Yeah, you still live this week. You see that? I compromised. You really like, oh, I can't wait to get in there and work today for Vinny. Probably not, or with Vinny. Jam writes in, the way our culture of capitalism embeds itself in people's minds created a real sense of entitlement on the part of the business owners. Yeah, it's not easy to put up the startup capital, but that doesn't give you the right to starve people. See, I don't know why this is so complicated. I really think that it's possible that you could run a business, and when you get big enough and profitable enough, that you begin to be really decent to your employees. Because you're profitable. And at that point, you could make more money and they could make more money. Isn't that a good thing? But,
I guess.
I guess, right? But apparently not a lot of other people guess. All right, new YouTube member, Rhonda Dodd. Rhonda, welcome, great to have you with us. Michael Goldman on Super Chat. No one in my family urgently needs Bernie Sanders' priorities to pass, but 2016 changed everything. Now we must elect progressives who know how to fight back so we don't get another Donald Trump. Thank you, TYT, for showing me the way. See, Michael, that's such a great point, and I love having the smartest audience in the world because it's not just about getting progressive priorities passed. You need strong Democrats to fight back against Republicans. And corporate Democrats are not allowed to be strong because they need permission of their corporate donors first. And those donors say, no, civility, civility. Status quo loves civility. Everybody shut up and do not fight back, especially if they're cutting our taxes. Do not fight back. So that's why corporate Democrats suck at fighting Republicans, and progressives are literally free to fight back against them. Great point. Trevance Gomez writes in, I support the bulk of TYT. Could you tell Fran that Trey said hi, please? All right, next time I see her. R. Stone writes in, as much as college football fan as I am, all the huge crowds scares the hell out of me, and I fear we're about to start from scratch with COVID. I loved the college football. I was back watching that Florida State Notre Dame game. I was like, do they know something I don't know? Oh no, it's Florida. Oh no, this is a really bad idea. TYT Cenk and Anna with you guys. Tons of news left, including Michael Moore, by the way. He's going to join us in a little bit, and he's going to talk about Afghanistan foreign policy. And by the way, also perhaps the evils of capitalism. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. Casper, more news.
All right. President Joe Biden's Department of Justice has weighed in on Texas's abortion ban. Now, the ban is, of course, after 6 weeks following conception, which means that 85 to 90% of abortions will be banned in the state of Texas. Now, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, has weighed in, and he said that the Justice Department has reached out to US attorneys' offices and FBI field offices in Texas and across the country to discuss our enforcement authorities. He claims that they will be protecting women's reproductive rights in Texas. But to be quite honest with you, the statement was a little vague in regard to the legality or ability to do so. Now, the department, he claims, will provide support from federal law enforcement when an abortion clinic or reproductive health center is under attack. He also says, we will not tolerate violence against those seeking to obtain or provide reproductive health services, physical obstruction of property damage in violation of the FACE Act. And there he's referring to the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, a 1994 law that prohibits threats to and obstruction of a person seeking reproductive health services or of providers. Now, following the passage of that bill, and once it was put into effect, abortion clinics noticed that there were anti-choice activists basically swarming around the clinics, shining spotlights at them and being incredibly intimidating. So it's probably what he's referring to there, but it's still unclear whether the Department of Justice can really block Texas from enacting this abortion ban. And it still needs to work its way through the courts. Remember, what the Supreme Court did was essentially refuse to block the law as it works its way through the federal courts. So they haven't weighed in on the constitutionality of it yet, but by the way that it's written, some legal experts are worried that the Supreme Court would allow it to stand. Although, Jake, I wanted to ask you a question, right? Because we talked about how the enforcement mechanism for the law doesn't rely on the state. They are allowing private citizens across the country to report possible illegal abortions in the state of Texas. But who would adjudicate that?
Yeah, so
it would be the courts.
It would, but the loophole that they're using for now, which is both good news and bad news. The bad news is obvious; it's allowing the law to stand. I'll get to the good news as part of the explanation. So normally, what would happen is when a state passes a law, anyone can challenge it because the state has enforcement power, and hence it affects people whether you've begun to enforce it or not, because you can enforce it, right? So then you can sue the state and block it before it really takes effect, right? But in this case, they're saying the state isn't going to enforce anything. It's the private citizens that are going to sue, and when they sue, that's when it'll become a matter that you can adjudicate. Okay, and then at that point, they would bring in the case, the argument that, hey, this is really a state's issue here, because without the state paying the $10,000, these vigilantes couldn't collect anyway. But right now, they can't even make that argument because no one is subject to the law yet, because no one's been sued for the $10,000 yet. None of the clinics have been sued yet.
I got that, but also, I mean, the judicial system is part of the state, isn't it? So isn't the judicial system also part of the enforcement mechanism?
Well, I hear you, but what they're saying is there's no case to adjudicate. Now, it's the liberal justices are saying, no, you're obviously creating a loophole which puts this into effect anyway and uses state power. So it's not wrong to ask that question. In fact, that's in my opinion, is probably the correct decision. But I'm just trying to explain the loophole to you guys. And what conservatives are saying and what the conservative justices are relying on is, we're not, and this is the good news part of it, they're saying we're not judging the merits of the case at all, because it's not yet a case in front of us. Once somebody sues a clinic for $10,000, then it'll be a case in front of us, and then we'll judge it on its merits.
Got it, yeah. So we'll see if the Justice Department can really protect women who are seeking abortion. Right now, the abortion clinics in the state of Texas are being incredibly cautious. In fact, the day that the law went into effect, they canceled all their appointments because they're worried about being tied up in litigation, which of course will be incredibly costly and could bankrupt them. So this is already having an impact on women in the state. Now, Matt Gaetz, of all people, a Republican congressman who's facing a DOJ investigation for possible sex trafficking of a minor, had some views on this. He says, quote, "The DOJ is out of control. This is totalitarian stuff. If they don't like the law, they will just use DOJ raw power to crush it." Oh, so regulating women's bodies and telling them what they can and can't do with their bodies, that's not authoritarian in any way. That's not totalitarian. That's not a problem at all, right? But the Department of Justice attempting to protect women's rights, that's where you get into totalitarian territory for Matt Gaetz. I mean, he's a clown.
But it's disheartening to see how easily people are duped. And ivermectin's one case of it that we're going to talk about later in the show. You just have to say simplistic things like, it's also approved for humans. But what is it approved for? No one asks, right? Or unfortunately, some people don't ask. In this case, he's like, can you believe the federal government is using its power like this? And all the right wingers go, yeah, I hate it when the government uses its power over human beings to take away their freedom. What do you think Texas was doing? I love it when Texas, the government uses their power to take away your freedom. But they genuinely believe it because they don't, you just have to frame it the right way. The federal government, when they act, it's tyrannical. When the Texas state government acts, it's wonderful and protects freedom. It doesn't have to make logical sense. It just has to fit pre-designed talking points and framing so it triggers the conservative mind to go, me like freedom, me hate tyranny. Right? Do you like freedom for women to choose what to do with their own bodies and their own lives? Me no like freedom. But no, wait, that's life. I have different talking point for that one. Okay, me like life. Okay, great. So you want to take the vaccine because 600,000 people have died. No, me no like life. I mean, me like freedom, right? They need their simple talking points. Look, I hate to do it to them, but they make us ridicule them with these. I mean, how can you not see the logical fallacy of Matt Gaetz? Okay, now back to the federal government and the Democrats. So when I see the headline, Biden and Garland say they're gonna do whatever it takes to protect the women of Texas, I say, okay, that's great, that's what we asked for, I'm happy to hear it, but I'm really curious how.
Right.
Right? Because there's a lot of different ways to go, and it's not that easy a question, because there's several different angles here in how it touches the law, right? And how it touches the federal government. So then I read and it says, oh, well, we will not allow violence at the clinics.
Right.
Well, look, I hope that's not the main issue. I'm glad you're doing that, but that's really gotta be the bare minimum. If that's all you're gonna do, that's not that interesting.
Yeah, okay, so let me just give my assessment. And I'm glad you said that because I'm like, is there something I'm missing here? I feel like the Biden administration is giving us the illusion of taking action when in reality they're not doing anything because they're not addressing the heart of the problem.
Yes.
They're talking about like we're gonna protect women as they enter abortion clinics. No, but women aren't gonna be able to enter abortion clinics at all if they can't even get an appointment for an abortion because the abortion providers are terrified of the costly litigation that they're now gonna have to deal with as a result of people from across the country suing them for allegedly providing illegal abortions. That's the problem. That was not addressed at all in the statement that came from the DOJ, at all.
No, I always think of Dodd-Frank in these situations. All you have to do is tell the press that you're doing something historic or really strong, and they'll all write it down. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Like Dodd-Frank was a very weak financial reform after the 2008 collapse that Obama passed, super weak. It let the bankers run roughshod again. And right now we're over leveraged. All those problems have come back in a different form. But they told everybody in the press, this is historic. And everybody in the press wrote, historic financial reform, as if it's fixed. And in this case, we are fighting back against Texas. We will do everything we can. They will do everything they can.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd.
It's stenography, yeah.
Yeah, look, yes, but what? What are they doing?
Right.
So, I mean, I was talking about airlifting the women out of Texas to make sure we can protect their rights if there's no clinics that are open.
That'd be pretty badass.
Okay, are we gonna do that? Are we gonna send in the National Guard? What are we doing? Oh, okay, I don't want them defacing the property of the clinics. Well, I don't either, and I don't want anybody's life in danger, but you can't brag about doing the least and then tell us you're doing the most. Well, apparently you can, as long as you have the mainstream media up your ass.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, well, we gotta take a break, but when we come back, Portland, the city of Portland might retaliate against Texas, but does it mean anything? We'll give you our views on that and more when we come back.
panic announcements for you guys. One is Bernie Sanders' birthday is today, so panic. Why? Because we're doing a Bernie birthday special on shoptyt.com, 15% off of the Bernie's Back collection. So go to shoptyt.com. Feel the Burn is back. That doesn't happen often. So check out shoptyt.com and get 15% off of any of those that Bernie merch. And the second reason to panic, of course, Michael Moore coming on the program in about 20 minutes. You guys are gonna love that conversation. I think he's been on once before, so the second time in 20 years. So that's great to have him back. All right, let's go to Twitch. It's a September over there. So if you get a sub or you gift a sub, 20% off. Is Bezos not merciful? Paige Lars says, love TYT. I found news that I support that has the same values and wants for this country as I do. Love Anna. Agreed, Paige.
Thanks, Paige.
Drink that. OJ gifted a sub. Love that. Crazy Hawaiian gifted 2 subs. Love that. Resub for 16 months. 16-month hype, she writes in. Yay, love you, my TYT fam. Right back at you. Dave Schmidt gifted 2 subs. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. Tell me what to put. Written 1,234 bits. You guys are all wonderful. Prescott Small on Super Chat writes in, 9/11 was Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabian money and Saudi Arabian people. Afghanistan was fake vengeance to satisfy the voters' lust for revenge. I highly suggest everyone read the 9/11 Commission report, including the non-redacted one, which hopefully will come out soon. Also watch Fahrenheit 9/11 to see what really happened, but we're gonna talk to Michael more about that in a little bit. Sarah says, the Church of S, Lucifer, because YouTube won't let me send the other name, is doing the good work and has a great comeback for the abhorrent Texas anti-choice law. I did not know that. It's an interesting point. We'll have to look into it. Kyle Cushing says, Cenk, is a 10,000 coming from the state, or are they collecting it from the people / institutions being sued? I thought it was the latter. You are right. They're mainly using the judiciary system. Sorry, I misspoke on that. That's my second correction on this story in the last couple of days. But I love that you guys are here to fact check me and keep me on my toes. But most importantly, get the facts right for everybody else. Yes, theoretically, if they lost, the $10,000 would come from the clinics. And so that's another way the Biden administration, by the way, could support those clinics by saying, we're gonna cover all your legal bills. Again, that would be near the bare minimum, but we still haven't gotten that yet. John Bogino writes in the member section, Cenk, Brett was right to bug you about hyping Game Busters last week. It was super fun, and afterwards we raided Adriana Vega's channel. You've got some great people over there working for TYT. It's amazing, we love it. Game Busters was great, Brett was right. All right, and we are out of time. When we come back, more amazing news for you guys. Back on TYT. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian. Don't often give the full names, I just did it. All right, more news.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about Portland. The Portland City Council is set to vote on essentially boycotting the state of Texas over its anti-choice law, which effectively bans the vast majority of abortions in the state. Now, the question is, can they do it, and will it really have any type of impact? Now, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler said that the city council will vote on whether to ban trading goods and services with Texas and also bar state employees from official business travel as well. The resolution, if passed, would also bar city employee travel to the state. Mayor Wheeler's office said that the resolution would be in effect until Texas either withdraws the abortion law or it gets overturned in court. Let me give you a little bit of Mayor Wheeler's statement on this. He says, quote, the law does not demonstrate concern for the health, safety, and well-being of those who may become pregnant. This law does not recognize or show respect for the human rights of those who may become pregnant. The law rewards private individuals for exercising surveillance and control over others' bodies. It violates the separation of church and state, and it will force people to carry pregnancies pregnancies against their will. And he's right about that. It also forces women to carry their pregnancies to term, even if they've been the victim of rape or incest. So it's a pretty extreme law, to say the least. But I do also want to note that it appears that if they do pass this resolution, it'll mostly be symbolic. So how much business does Portland do with Texas? A quick search of Portland's current 3-volume, 1,904-page budget returned only one mention of Texas, but that was a reference to a highway improvement project which included Southwest Texas Street in Portland. The Texas economy, by the way, is the 9th largest in the world, and that's according to the Texas Economic Development Corporation. Texas exports about $315.9 billion worth of goods and services to countries outside of the United States each year, including exports like petroleum and coal products. So I like that the city council is considering making a stand, even if it's just a symbolic one. But just know that even if they do vote in favor of this resolution and overwhelmingly pass it, it is unlikely to really have an impact on the decisions of Texas lawmakers who are trying to appeal to their rabid right-wing voters.
Yeah, so I still love it. I think it's the right idea. And sometimes I talk about building a change machine here at TYT, and of course, it's a funny phrase, right? And nobody knows what it means. But part of what it means
sounds like a great way to describe it then.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So hey, listen, I'm here all week, okay, coming up with these brilliant ideas. No, but part of what it means, and eventually I hope people understand what we're going for here, is, for example, I'd like to follow suit. If we were a larger corporation, it'd be easier to do and say, hey, we're not going to do business in Texas either, and we'd have to figure out what that means, et cetera. But then I would love to build a coalition of small businesses saying we will not go to Texas. That would have more impact. And then Portland starts this. I would love to help a coalition of cities that say we're not going to do business with Texas anymore, and that would have a huge impact. Both those things would. So that's part of why I'm trying to grow this into a bigger network so we can have bigger impact in a lot of ways, including financial, because that's the only thing that really moves the needle, especially for conservatives, especially because their donors are pretty much business interests. And so if you hurt the business interest or you affect the business interest, then you could affect laws like this. And then all of a sudden, Republican politicians are a little bit more careful how they tread. At this point, they're not at all careful, because Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, was asked about the fact that there was no exception to rape or incest, as Anna pointed out, in this law. And he said, no, it's okay, because we've got a plan. We're gonna wipe out rape from Texas. So that won't happen
nailed
anyway.
it, yeah. Because especially the Republican Party, they've shown themselves to be people who take rape and the mistreatment of women very seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And rape has not been wiped out anywhere on the planet. It's an absurd thing to say. It's the kind of thing you say if you have nothing else left to say, which is Greg Abbott's situation, because they're saying basically, if you don't carry your rapist baby to term, we're gonna empower a whole bunch of vigilantes in the state of Texas to come after you and the clinics that you're going to and try to hound you and bankrupt the people trying to help you.
Now the woman, by the way, just to clarify, can't be sued.
Yeah, the clinics can.
But the clinics can, and the woman would have to be part of those proceedings, which would be awful.
You have to track the women and violate their privacy and be totally gross to them, okay? And of course, the effect of it is to make them carry the zygote all the way to term and take care of it for 18 years. Basically, turn the woman into chattel, an indentured servant of the state. That's why people compare it to Handmaid's Tale, because you're using the women for their bodies and not asking them for permission. But yes, the clinics pay the money.
Yep. All right, one more story before we go to our break, because Nike stepped in it, and I don't know how they didn't see this coming. So, Nike decided to shut down its corporate offices for a full week, because would you look at that? They're really looking out for their workers. They want to make sure that they focus on their mental health. Things have been really difficult with COVID. But it's retail workers, the forward-facing employees who have to deal with customers all day, those in the service industry, they're expected to show up. So how did Nike not see how awful this idea was, especially as they're promoting it as something that makes them the good guys for looking out for the well-being of their workers. Now, it has closed its corporate offices for the week so employees can, quote, enjoy additional time off to rest and recover, end quote, according to their statement. Matt Morazzo, a senior manager at Nike, posted on his LinkedIn page, quote, it's not just a week off for the team, it's an acknowledgement that we can prioritize mental health and still get work done. But as I mentioned earlier, the retail workers are still expected to show up. In fact, when a reporter from KGW News called a Nike retail store, the person who answered the phone said this was the first they were hearing about the paid time off for corporate employees. And an associate professor from the University of Oregon School of Law said, if it is the case that part-time workers in a retail store are expected to come to work, whereas headquarter offices are not, that also sends a message about which kind of workers they care about and are willing to invest in. And by the way, this doesn't even account for the people who actually make the products for Nike, who overwhelmingly do not live in the United States and are in fact exploited in countries like China and Vietnam. I'll get to those details in a second, Cenk.
Yeah, so apparently they didn't run it by their employees at the retail stores. They told them to just do it.
Sounds like they didn't want to shatter limits.
I guess if the shoe fits.
But they could just do it.
They could, but I said that earlier. Okay.
Oh, you did? Oh, I wasn't paying attention.
Okay, well, I thought we maxed out on bad dad jokes. Okay,
right.
So seriously though, it's an interesting story and an important one. Look, the original idea of looking out for the people working at headquarters is not a bad one, as long as you did it for everybody, right?
Exactly.
And so, like, I don't want to just pile on them and say, I can't believe they wanted to give people more time off. That's great, that's great news. We're just asking you to do it more uniformly. And what's really interesting is that it's the lack of an ability to see outside your own perspective. Like, they didn't even think of the retail guys, obviously, because it went to print, they're bragging about it. Like, yeah, I mean, the guys who make the shoes in Vietnam or wherever, oh, God help them, right? That was never in question. They were not gonna get a week off. But it just never, I think it never occurred to them that we have workers elsewhere that aren't executives.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that's the mindset of a lot of executives. They think like, oh no, but they gotta work. We need to have the stores open. But you don't have to work. Well, that's also interesting.
No, but to be fair, Cenk, I'm sure the executives work a lot harder than everyone else. So they deserve that week off and everyone
else. But by the way, they definitely believe that.
Of course they believe that. Yes. Of course they believe that.
Yeah.
And it's insane. Anyway, all right, so let's talk about, look, we live in a global economy, right? And that global economy means that they don't just have workers in the United States, they are exploiting workers in other countries like China and Vietnam. In fact, almost all Nike shoes are in fact manufactured outside of the United States. The leading manufacturer of Nike shoes is China and Vietnam, each accounting for 36% of the total manufactured worldwide. Indonesia accounts for 22% and Thailand for 6% of the Nike shoes that are being produced worldwide. Now, there's also the issue of forced labor, because when we're talking about China, there's also the issue of Uyghur Muslims who get forced into these factories. And there was recently an op-ed published in the Washington Post that touched on this. It's a team of researchers who have been tracking the treatment of Uyghur Muslims Uyghur Muslims in China. And here's what they found. For months, our team of researchers based in Australia have been tracking the movement of Uyghur citizens from their homeland in the western region of Xinjiang and their other parts of China. We found that in the past 3 years, more than 80,000 of them have been transported to factories across China where they are compelled to work on production lines linked to at least 83 brands. The Post's Anna Fifield visited the shoe factory in one of the shoe factories in China, producing sneakers for Nike, and found that it resembled a prison with barbed wire, watchtowers, surveillance cameras, and a dedicated police station. Uyghur workers at the factory, she was told, did not come on their own accord, nor could they return home for the holidays. But hey, don't worry, the corporate offices, they're getting a week off. Awesome.
Yeah, look, we're having trouble getting people to care about the women of Texas. Portland has hopefully started a trend by saying that they're going to boycott Texas. We hope more people do to effectuate change there. But getting people to try to care about Uyghurs in China and the 83 brands that they're forced into making in these camps, these concentration camps or outside of the camps. Unfortunately, in America, it's just near impossible to get people to care. And that's the reality of it. It's so much so that even Nike executives forgot that these are folks that are also related to their brand and make their shoes. And I mean, a week off, what would be great is if China didn't put them in concentration camps anymore, and you guys could put economic pressure on to make sure that doesn't happen. But of course, they're not gonna do that. And so I'd love to give them credit for coming up with a good idea about the week off, but they really got to do better in making it uniform. Otherwise, it looks inescapably elitist.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that does it for our first hour, but stick around because when we come back for the second hour, Michael Moore will be joining us for a discussion on Afghanistan, the economy, and more.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was Too Strong Coffee? Yes, new, TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT.
That 300 million is a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 15 billion views.
Damn.
All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively. What do you know? Rob says, rejoice for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Jenkins Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce, 1971, saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug, I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging, watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right? Wow, man.
I can see the void.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable, Senator Sanders. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted. Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
Here's what we do. We go beyond the headline. We are willing to engage in transparent conversations with those who do not think like me. We also make sure that you know what's happening not only nationally, but in your local area. Make sure you tune in to Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, Monday through Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time.
Cool news, shopdyt.com now has books. There's a whole bunch of books there. You're gonna be shocked to find out that they're largely progressive. Of course! Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People, is there. It's a fantastic story from Jesse Jackson to Bernie Sanders to AOC that explains the progressive movement probably better than any book I've ever read. Speaking of awesome books, my dad's got a book out called The Original Young Turk, where he goes from the poorest olive farmer you ever met in your life to living the American dream.
All right, welcome back to TYT. Cenk and Anna with you guys. Lots of hilarious stories coming up, including ivermectin might affect your libido, your sperm count. Oops, somebody go tell Joe Rogan. But we'll give you the details in a little bit. And so before you go run off and do that, let us tell you what the story is first. And then a couple of prominent African-American conservatives say that maybe the slave owners should have gotten reparations. Interesting. So all that's coming up. But first, a fantastic guest.
Yes, joining us now is Michael Moore, a man who really doesn't need an introduction, but he is getting one. He's the host of the critically acclaimed Rumble with Michael Moore podcast. He also just launched a Substack, and he will be hosting a free screening of his film Fahrenheit 9/11 on Friday, September 10th at 9 p.m. Eastern on the platform at michaelmoore.com. That's michaelmoore.com, which you can see at the graphic right there. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's been way too long, and major props to both of you for what you do. It's much appreciated by all of us out here.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
So I'll start with the first question, and I'm really excited that you're here to weigh in on the fact that Biden actually stayed true to his commitment to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. Of course, that's 2 decades and $2 trillion later. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. There's been a lot of criticism toward the Biden administration over the withdrawal, all coming from corporate media. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't understand the criticism other than there are those who have a vested interest in him failing. Now, let's just, for those who don't know, in full disclosure, I did not vote for Joe Biden in the Michigan primary. I voted for Bernie Sanders. I was out on the road with Bernie, campaigning with him, and frankly, we never saw Joe Biden anywhere out on the road. I mean, I didn't know what was going on with that campaign. And literally, New Hampshire, Iowa, wherever we were, you saw Amy Klobuchar, you saw other people who were running, but you never saw Joe Biden. And I didn't know what was going on. And of course, in the first 2 or 3 primary and caucus races, Biden was like 4th, 5th, 6th. It was what it was.
Right.
But since then, what I have seen, I did vote for him in November, and I knew Bernie. I mean, I've known Bernie since he first ran up in Burlington back in the 1990. When he said that Biden was a friend of his, he didn't mean it like a political friend. I mean, I think he meant that Biden was a friend, and they respected each other, and they spoke to each other, and what I've witnessed in these first 7 months is not a lean to the center or to the right, but to the left, to Bernie. And thing after thing that Biden has done, whether it's the child tax credit that will decrease child poverty by 50%, whether it's the latest thing with the food stamps, the first real increase in food stamps since 1962, that will take millions off the hunger rolls. You go down so many things here, and it's not that I don't have my criticisms of a number of what's happened, a number of things in the last 7 months, but item after item, I just started making this joke to people. I don't know this for a fact, but I get the sense that Biden and Bernie are like having a late night, before going to bed chat with each other, because a lot of what Biden is doing is essentially Bernie's belief system, Bernie's values, Bernie's, and Biden's careful not to call any of these things what Bernie would call them, like Medicare for all. Yet, but the truth of what he's done is much of what Bernie has been pushing for decades. And so I've been, the thing is that people are like, Mike, don't say anything good about Biden. I said, yeah, but we don't have any credibility when we criticize Biden if we don't admit when he does things right, that he does things right.
Yeah,
then we need to criticize him. People will listen to us because they know we will judge it fairly.
Yeah, that we're honest actors and we're not just going after Biden for our brands or whatever. And look, I agree with you. I mean, there have been some pretty surprising things coming from the Biden administration. I love that you mentioned the expansion of the food stamp program. I am pleased with the fact that he pulled out of Afghanistan. And he did also wind down the drone strikes quite a bit from the Trump administration. Now, of course, we also should mention that he did a drone strike that was absolutely devastating to civilians in Afghanistan recently. But on the economic side, just real quick, do you think that he's genuine in wanting to pass the reconciliation bill that includes the vast majority of his agenda items, right? Because separating the bipartisan infrastructure bill and then the reconciliation bill, which has everything that we need, I think actually puts the Democrats and his agenda at a disadvantage. What do you think?
I think it was on actually the day that we lost the Afghanistan war on that Sunday. That night, Nancy Pelosi released a statement saying that that essentially, she didn't say it in these words because she'll never say the squad was right, but she basically said that what Alexandria and the others want, we're going to do. In other words, we are not going to pass the first infrastructure bill detached from the second one, that they've got to be passed together. The one that already has passed both houses, but has to come back to the House to reconcile the differences in the two bills, and the 3.5 trillion human infrastructure bill. And I thought, wow, and this got very little coverage in the sense that Pelosi was leaning toward what we all want. And I honestly think that that is what's going to happen. I'm not a predictor of political shenanigans in Washington, D.C., but I have the sense that Biden wants that 3.5 trillion passed. I just saw him I'm in New York right now, in Queens, on TV live, saying this, that the first infrastructure, absolutely, we need all of that, but we have to have all this other stuff too, because the other stuff has to do with climate, and we cannot ignore this. And he was very forceful about it. And I have a sense that with what's happened, especially climate-wise in these last few weeks, that this has had a very strong impact on him. And he knows that this will not be a successful term in office if at the end of the term we're still talking about climate, when, as you guys know how I feel about this, that time to talk about climate was 20 years ago, or 40 years ago when Jimmy Carter put the solar panels on the White House roof. That was the right idea. And then Reagan came in, tore them off the roof, and that was the end of that. And we've gone decades now. We've lost all this time, and now we're far behind what we used to call global. We're far beyond global warming, climate change. There's no change going on. There's a catastrophe afoot. There is an extermination event underway, and this has to be attacked with such a ferociousness. And I think Biden has got it. I think in the way that I have watched him literally change, the Biden that we grew up with, that we knew, he wasn't anti-war. He wasn't wanting to fix our criminal our criminal justice system, the mass incarceration industrial complex. He wasn't for any of that.
Right.
And now this is what he talks about. And now he not only just talks, but has started to do things. I mean, again, during the 2 weeks of the loss of this war, something else happened. He made his first step to eliminate college debt. No, this is, you guys might have covered this, but you'd be the only ones who would cover it. He signed a thing saying that all disabled Americans who owe these student loans, who have this debt, it is now forgiven, it's gone. Now, that's not, we're talking, there's $1.6 trillion of student debt that people are carrying in this country. And that disabled debt was probably in the vast hundreds of thousands, but not anywhere near what we need to deal with. But it's just another sign that he's put his toe in the burning water, and he likes it. It feels good.
Well,
and in that way, he needs to get our support, as opposed to, but as Anna said, if he's going to use drones and civilians are killed, we have to be the first to speak up against it, and we'll have the credibility to do so.
Yes,
because we are supportive of the good things that he does.
Yeah, so obviously context matters, facts matter, and so credit where credit is due and critique where it's due. So should be elementary, but unfortunately it oftentimes isn't. Which leads me back to the war issue here on the near 20th anniversary of 9/11, and I know you got a free screening of Fahrenheit 9/11 coming up on michaelmoore.com. I want to go back to that issue, Michael, because 77% of the country says the withdrawal was right, including 74% of Republicans. Trump was theoretically in favor of withdrawal. He didn't actually do it, but he was in favor of it, started that process. Biden did in fact withdraw. But yet when we turned on cable news for the last several weeks, we saw wall-to-wall pro-occupation, pro-war coverage, wall-to-wall. Whenever a dissent broke out, it became breaking news. Oh my God, James Carville disagrees with 99% of other people on cable news. Oh my God, Admiral Mullen said something sensible. It's, no military leader has done that in decades, et cetera. And that became big breaking news. And then today, Lindsey Graham came back and said, we need to reinvade Afghanistan. And so it appears the neoconservatives and mainstream media are the only ones left in the pro-war camp. But neoconservatives, I suppose we could understand a little bit because that's what they do, but I'd love to get your thoughts on Lindsey Graham, but also on cable news.
Well, war is very, very good for the media and for the powers that be that run our media. They were probably shocked. First of all, they couldn't figure out how quickly the Taliban had crossed Afghanistan and that this thing was ending. And it's kind of like, no, wait, what do you mean there's only 2 episodes left of Game of Thrones? No, I need more. Wait, Mrs. Maisel isn't coming back for a year? No, this is the kind of mentality, not just with the media, but with us, the public, because we become so addicted to this. And good for Biden that he didn't fall for any of it. They were already preparing their Republican Party spots for next year, how we left the Americans behind. Nobody got left behind. All right, first of all, I'm just saying, but we took 120,000 Afghan citizens out of there. That safely, amazingly, that I have to say, Cenk, maybe you know the number. I don't think we had 120,000 translators in Afghanistan. That would mean there would be 120,000 who could speak both English and Afghan. I'm just saying, I'm not, I'm glad for everybody that got out, but to still criticize and say some got left behind, how many translators were there? We got everybody out that wanted to get out, and we got all the Americans out except for, they say there's 100 who are actually Afghan citizens who hold a dual citizenship. They're also Americans, and they want to leave still. So you know what? Biden will get them out. The same Biden that got out every single American troop, every single American citizen, everybody with a green card, and whatever of the 120,000 Afghans who could get on those planes, they all got. Honest to God, I don't know what you thought, but I thought they did 770 flights in those 2 weeks. 770 flights, and not one was shot down. That means Biden and his team did a negotiation, a brilliant negotiation with, of all people, the Taliban, to not fire a single bullet at any American who's trying to get out, to let every Afghan who was there on the tarmac leave with their lives intact. Their life, their lives are gone. Their life, though, is alive. And let those planes take off and not shoot down a single one of them. And I don't know if you remember the photo last week of the last soldier getting on the C-130, last American. It was a General Donahue, and there's no soldiers behind him at the airport. Nobody protecting his back. So normally, I think what you're trained to do is you walk backwards onto the ramp up into the plane with your gun out, because there's nothing but the enemy there now. There's no Americans to protect you. And he doesn't do that. He walks with his back to the enemy, and just walks up the ramp onto the plane knowing he wasn't gonna get shot. How did he know he wasn't gonna get shot? Because he knew he had a commander-in-chief that knew what he was doing and skillfully negotiated terms with the enemy so that the enemy would not cause any harm to any American troop or to any American citizen or to any Afghan who was on that tarmac that wanted to leave,
Michael,
or to any of the 700 planes that left. That, you have to admit, that's not Dunkirk. That's not where 15,000 allies lost their lives. That will go down in history as the most amazing retreat of a power that lost a war. Absolutely amazing. Yes, chaos, yes. Confusion, yes. ISIS got to do their evil act, yes. But the enemy, the Taliban, the 20-year enemy, not a bullet. Everybody lives, every plane leaves, and the general just kind of walks onto the plane with his back to the enemy, knowing he wouldn't be shot. Come on, people.
Speaking of negotiating with the Taliban, in your recent or your latest Substack, you write about the oil barons who invited members of the Taliban to Texas to negotiate. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that there is a lot missing from the corporate media coverage of our relationship with the Taliban. In fact, we showed a video of Hillary Clinton from years ago where she had admitted that the United States had armed the Taliban to essentially fight the Soviets, which were occupying their country, and now we're turning around and fighting them. That video did really, really well, because I think most people in America don't get that content. So can you talk about that negotiation process with oil barons in Texas with Taliban members?
Very easy. And again, most Americans don't know this because it was not covered by our media. And it was only through my and my archive team's research that we found it in the BBC, not an obscure news source. It was right there. Any American network could have picked it up. In 1997, George W. Bush and his buddies at Unocal is of course one of our big energy companies, invited the Taliban leadership to come to Texas and meet with these oil company and gas company executives to work out a deal because Unocal wanted to build a pipeline across Afghanistan to get to I believe the Caspian Sea, and so they were invited to come and negotiate this deal to try to work this out. Now, this is really just it's 4 years before 9/11. It's 3 years before Bush is elected president, and he's got the Taliban in Texas. We're not the history. They've tried to just sweep this history under the rug. And then in the Substack of mine today, my essay, I embed in the essay a 7-minute segment I did on my show at the time, The Awful Truth, where I went to visit the Taliban leadership. Their UN consulate in New York City was in Queens, not over on First Avenue by the UN. They were in Queens in a strip mall next to a nail salon and a endoscopy clinic. And I asked if I could come and talk to them, and they said yes. And I went in and had a meeting with them, and I have the video there on my site. But there's so many things that, look, I love this country, but we are a nation of slow learners, and I don't mean the kind of slow learning in school that many people have to go through. I'm talking about our inability to know what's going on in the world, to know that there is a world outside of our world, to our ignorance has been one of our worst enemies. And the reason for that on many levels is that ignorance leads to fear, and fear leads to hate, and hate leads to violence. And that is the equation. Whether it ends up in the death of George Floyd, whether it's the next war we're on our way to, those in charge can take us and make us do these things and believe that the other is out to get us, the other is the enemy because of our ignorance, and then we become afraid. We have to get rid of our ignorance. We have to educate ourselves. We have to watch shows like this. We have to read books. And if we do that, then we have a better chance of not falling for the trap, because George W. Bush, 20 years ago, this week, had a 70% approval rating. And when he started the invasion of Afghanistan, had a 70% approval of the war. And only one of the 535 members of Congress voted against that war, Representative Barbara Lee. That's it. So in fact, Michael, one last question here. You also wrote in that piece, a really good piece, about bin Laden. You said he simply sought to bankrupt us financially, politically, spiritually, and to kill more of us and get us to wipe out our American dream. And here we are, 20 years later, and it appears that your conclusion, which I share, is that in a lot of ways he succeeded. He just got us to basically do it to ourselves. Help folks understand what you mean by that. Well, in some ways you have to think, was this guy some sort of a mad genius that not only did he know that the towers would fall, being an architectural civil engineer, as were 8 of the hijackers, civil engineering degrees. But how did he know that we would then, on our own, not because he made us, there was no gun to our head, we would pass a Patriot Act to get rid of our constitutional rights? How did he know that over 20 years we would install a security camera on nearly every other corner in America to spy on ourselves, to spy on each other? How would he know? How did he know we would do that? How did he know we'd stay for 20 years and bankrupt ourselves? $300 million a day is what we spent during these 20 years. What could we have done to better ourselves, to be a better people, a better country? $300 million a day, that's, I don't know, how many days is that in 20 years, 365 a year? Sorry, I went to Catholic school. Well, not sorry, because now I just did the math. I think it's probably close to 75,000 days. 300 million a day? Come on, what the hell? What would we have done? Wouldn't it be great if we could just do a lottery? all these school districts, all these townships, these cities, you're gonna get it. If you get picked, you get $300 million, do with it what you want. How much better would we be? How much better would childcare be? How much better would our healthcare system be? So many things. And we did this to ourselves. We destroyed ourselves, and we allowed madness to enter the White House in 2017, and then that encouraged the almost civil war that we're now having to experience with fighting each other. Yeah. That the enemy now is each other. How sad that we're, and so I wrote today that in this strange and sad way, Bin Laden won, but he couldn't have done it without us. He couldn't have done it without our help. And we did it to each other. We did it to our economy. We evicted how many millions after 2008? All this stuff that is so shameful. How did he know that we would actually start doing this to ourselves? And of course, he probably didn't know, but he did have our number. And he knew that we are frightened people, and we are sadly ignorant. Half of us still aren't vaccinated. So I'm saddened by this. And I think that the lessons of 9/11 still haven't been learned. And so we have our work cut out for us.
Absolutely.
But I have a strong belief that eventually we will come to our senses. It just may be too late when it comes to our environment and other things, but I hope not. I really hope not.
Well, your documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11, is a must-watch documentary. You go into all of these issues, the Bush administration, and you're doing a free screening for people. So everyone check that out on Friday, September 10th at 9 p.m. Eastern time over at michaelmoore.com. And Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, it's great. It's great to talk to you guys. It's great what you do. And thank you for telling people to join us Friday night for this free screening online. It's we're gonna have a Q&A afterwards, so it's all free. Please join us, and hopefully we can prevent the next war. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Michael.
Take care.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we've got more news for you, including some of the unintended side effects of taking ivermectin, especially for something that it doesn't actually treat. We'll be right back.
All right, we're going to our Twitch audience here for the social break. First, Crump, the THC Dragon, gave 5,000 bits, which is amazing, thank you. And wrote in, Michael Moore introduced me to progressive politics when we watched Roger and Me in school. He helped revitalize my hometown, Traverse City, Michigan, through the State Theater Project and the TC Film Fest. He's an American hero. Yes, he was a lone voice in the wilderness for many, many years as corporate media ran roughshod. And every once in a while, Michael Moore would pop his head up and go, well, isn't this interesting? And he would show you a bunch of facts that were pretty much indisputable. And you'd have to go, yeah, that was pretty interesting. And that's why he became a legendary documentarian and so popular. And I appreciate his kind words about TYT in that interview too. All right, more from Twitch. Dave Schmidt gifted 4 subs and Late Bloomer gifted a sub. We appreciate it as always, guys. Danielle Labiqua writes in, hey Cenk and Anna, great to see you both. Last week was rough, so I wasn't very active in chat, but I'm back now and as always grateful for all of my beautiful and supportive TYT family. Love you all so much.
Also want to just send some love to Jess Conadragon. I don't want to get into details, but we're with you. Hang in there. We love you.
Great. Link to Hylian Dragon says, perfect timing to resub. Mailman delivered my shiny new Shop TYT snapback today. Pumped to rock the mint. Okay, love it. And Aiden Evans in the super chat says, honestly, I wasn't expecting much from Biden and he's exceeded my expectations. He seems to be at the very least begin the blueprints for the progressive change we need in this country. And it's made me like him again. There's a lot of nuance there, but I hear you. And Shireen Naruzi wrote in, Cenk, it's not the Church of Satan, it's a satanic temple. We're 2 very different organizations with two different ideologies and politics. I hear you, but I didn't say it was a viewer that I was reading the quote of. Anyways, we'll be back. Back on TYT, one quick comment from Super Chat. The Flying Contradiction Dragon said, thank you TYT for spreading the news in a way that doesn't make me want to give up on humanity. Much love to all of you and teaching us how we can all make a change. That's absolutely right. Michael Moore started doing it with a tiny little camera and just started going into buildings and recording things. We did it with a tiny little camera in an office building. You can do it too. There's so much hope in the world. We're gonna get those victories together. All right, Casper.
All right. There was some tragic news over the weekend. Actor Michael K. Williams, who's best known for his roles in Boardwalk Empire and The Wire, was tragically found dead in his Brooklyn apartment over the weekend. He was discovered by his nephew, and it's being reported as an apparent drug overdose, although there hasn't been a toxicology report yet. We should get that report in a few weeks. But TMZ reported that our law enforcement sources say NYPD detectives are conducting an investigation into the origin of the narcotics cops found at the site of the actor's death over the weekend, which we're told are believed to be heroin-based. Now, Williams was very open about his struggles with addiction and how it was a struggle for him every single day. In fact, during a interview for a lengthy profile that the New York Times had written about him back in 2017, he said, quote, addiction doesn't go away. It's an everyday struggle for me, but I'm fighting. And it's such a tragic story, not only because it impacted his life and possibly his death, but drug overdoses are still very much a huge problem and epidemic in this country. It didn't just go away when the pandemic struck. In fact, the number of drug overdoses in 2020 shot up compared to 2019, and it feels like everyone's just kind of forgotten that we're dealing with an opioid epidemic, and these deaths of despair are still taking place. So, Cenk, I wanted to get your thoughts on Michael Williams and just how awful the story is.
Yeah, so we did all these interviews back in the radio days that are now pretty much lost to history. But and there's a lot I'm really proud of. Gore Vidal interview, Howard Zinn, a lot of these interviews. Luckily, we got to do. Before they passed away, and it's been 20 years that we've been on the air. But one of the proudest I have is actually with Michael K. Williams, and It was a wild, super interesting interview, and he mainly wanted to come up as a dancer. He'd gotten obviously attacked, and a blade had cut his face. We have some details of that now, but I wish we could share that interview with you guys for him to tell the story in his own voice. And it was an amazing story, but he made the best of it, and he turned it into something that he could build off of in his acting career. I think it was P. Diddy who actually got him into acting in a rap video, because he was a dancer and wanted to dance in the videos, and then he got into acting through the videos. And he's a really well-trained dancer as well. So his life story is an amazing one. The addiction issue obviously has racked this country. I mean, it's been a problem for how many decades now? And of course, the latest surge is because of the Oxy, and that's still a scourge upon the land. And it's something he struggled with all the time. If you have friends and family that's in addiction, that's got addiction issues, it's the hardest thing in the world because it takes over their mind. And to be able to fight through that every day and just show up and exist is a struggle. And unfortunately, he lost that struggle today, but he was a great person. And by the way, also helped with a lot of progressive causes. People might not know that, but African-American causes, progressive causes, a really wonderful guy.
Yeah, that 2017 profile on him is a good read, just to get to know his life and the struggles that he's gone through. And he, again, was very open about his addiction to drugs. They write that he developed a drug problem of his own, and by 19, he was cycling in and out of clinics. To finance his addiction, he tried his hand at carjacking and credit card fraud, though the schemes left him with little more than a thickening arrest record. And look, I share that because look at what he turned into, like an incredibly talented person. Cenk mentions his work on progressive causes, but he was my favorite character and favorite actor in Boardwalk Empire. He was just fantastic, right?
Chalky White.
Chalky White, exactly.
Co-starred with Kevin McCarthy, Mickey Doyle. Hey, I tell you what, okay? I don't like what you're doing there, Chalky. That's how Kevin McCarthy talks too. Anyway, but he was, of course, as Omar in The Wire, he was a legend, an absolute. Honestly, that's why we asked for the interview, because I was like, we get a chance to interview Omar. It's like the greatest thing.
So they continue to write in that piece. One night, this is about the scar on his face. One night at a bar in Queens on the eve of his 25th birthday, he stepped outside to find a group of men jumping his friend. He tried to intervene. One of the muggers pulled out a razor blade and sliced him across his face and neck. One gash went straight through his jugular. The next day, his mother took out a second insurance policy on his life. He told the Times at the time, "She told me I'll never live to 30. And I believed her." Now, tragically, he died at the age of 54, way too young. And it's, again, an incredibly tragic story. And I want to just go back to the reality that so many Americans face with their own addictions. Because if you look at the numbers, they did go up in terms of drug overdoses in 2020. Data from the CDC show that there were 90,237 drug overdose deaths in the 12 months ending in September 2020, a leading indicator that implies a substantial increase over 2019's total of 70,630. 70% of drug overdose deaths are opioid related, according to the most recent CDC figures. And remember, heroin addiction that increased as a result of opioid addictions. And then when the federal government made it more difficult to get opioids, that's when people turned to harder drugs like heroin and fentanyl. So again, this is very much a real struggle and a real problem in the country that I think has just been kind of forgotten about.
Yeah, so last thing is to just double down on what Anna said earlier about addiction problems. Look, when I was a kid, they kind of the media painted it as evil people do drugs. And look, now that we're grown-ups, let's put childish things aside. It's an absurd thing to think. And it was easier to think in the awful stereotypes the media put out there when they thought it mainly affected minorities. Now, because of Oxy, it affects everyone. And all of a sudden, a lot of people have woken up and said, oh, it turns out it's a health issue and these people aren't actually evil. To which I say, of course. But also, guys, don't give up on people. So it was easy for everybody to give up on Michael K. Williams when he had the problems in the beginning, and he could have spent a long time in jail and maybe stayed there. Instead, he got a second chance and he made something brilliant out of it. So for as long as he was with us, he was in a lot of ways literally a shining star.
Let's take a break, but when we come back, the story that I'm sure you're all waiting for. What does ivermectin do to your little swimmers, men? We've got some data. We'll be right back.
All right, so don't forget, it's Bernie's birthday today, so there's 15% off of Bernie's back collection. That's at shoptyt.com, of course. So jump in there today if you can. 15% off shoptyt.com on Bernie's collection. Okay, and Wozniak is up next. So of course we do the bonus episode for the members first. tyt.com/join, and then go to twitch.tv/tyt for Wozniak Labre's show. Wozniak, ironically, he's back from vacation and in the land of Wozniak. All right, so that's a great show. You'll love it. Now let's go to our members. Lend me a quarter for the change machine, writes in. Opiates are terrible. A lot of creative and intelligent people have fallen victim to it throughout history, and if they OD at some point, it's crushing. Agreed. And it's not about intelligence and it's not about morality. Somebody makes the mistake of trying it once, and depending on their proclivities and their nature, they can get hooked immediately. So, as always, give people a second chance. All right, Daniel says, my yearly membership renewal just kicked in yesterday. Certainly could not object. I hardly ever miss TYT and Indisputable. Cenk, Anna, and Rashad, I'm afraid I am somewhat addicted. This was before we started talking about the addiction issue, but thank you, we appreciate it. That's wonderful of you. And membership makes this show possible. So that's why I love doing the show with you guys. You could hit the join button below on YouTube, or you can go to tyt.com/join. Kofefe19 writes in the member section, hey Cenk and Anna, I wanted to clarify, it was me who was wearing the vulva costume as I chased away the anti-choice protester at the clinic I worked at. I highly recommend it. Turns out anti-choice protesters don't like being chased by gigantic vulvas. Who knew? Okay, now we know because of you. Thank you, that's how we do the show together. Vulva costumes, apparently that's the answer. He'd written in earlier last week. Eclectic Miscellanea writes in, I'm still surprised that the corporate media turned so ferociously against Biden suddenly. Could Michael Moore be right that Biden is actually evolving on some issues, or the establishment think he's too unpredictable now? Well, look, there's a lot of answers there. I'll give Biden credit on the $3.5 trillion once he passes it. Hasn't happened yet. But I give him credit on Afghanistan withdrawal because it did happen, okay? And you should give him credit for that. And the media loves war for a lot of reasons, including their advertisers. Dragonheart writes in super chat, all the women that are forced to give birth, leave them at the Governor Abbott's house or office for him to raise. So that's one way of looking at it. Okay, I am out of time, but we got many great stories left for you guys, so come right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
Ivermectin, the drug for parasitic infections that does not help treat COVID, apparently could also make men infertile. That's according to data that was done in Nigeria, but there were other studies that were done on livestock, several other studies that were done on livestock that showed similar results. Now, as Wanget writes, there are several studies dating back years suggesting that ivermectin lowers sperm count and sperm motility. Now, most of them have to do with animals, but one did analyze the effects of ivermectin on the sperm count of men using it to treat their river blindness. River blindness is caused by a parasitic infection because this is a drug for parasitic infections. Just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. Now, with that said, here's what the study concluded. There was a significant reduction or drop in the sperm counts of the patients after their treatment with ivermectin. Furthermore, the study showed a significant and remarkable drop in the sperm motility of the patients after their treatment with ivermectin. As for morphology of the sperm, there was a rise in the abnormal sperms after treatment compared with the morphology before the commencement of treatment. These changes, no doubt, are the results of the effects of the drug on the sperm function of the patients. They also note that although there was no noticeable changes in the sperm volumes, sperm viscosity and the sperm liquefaction time, the results of this study is enough to cause infertility in these patients. So those are actual excerpts from the study itself. But nonetheless, it hasn't stopped people like Alex Jones from not only pushing the drug, but allegedly taking it live on their show. Take a look.
Overhead shot, please. You know what this is? This is ivermectin for humans that won a Nobel Prize as an antiviral. And this is inhalable, or these are the tablet steroids. So let me show you. I was gonna do this anyways earlier. See this? See this, Fauci? You see this, Bill Gates? I'm gonna kill those prions, you bastard murderers. You're gonna hit me with a bioweapon, you monster. You wanna suppress me? You wanna kill me, you son of a, you goddamn demon? You think I'm easy to kill? Think I'm gonna roll over to your crap? No. And Joe Rogan kicked your murdering too. You'd love to bury him too, you little monster maggot. He's in this National Geographic piece about, oh, I don't usually deal with my enemies right away. I get them later. Yeah, you creep up on with a poison injection, dressed up in a lab coat, you little Joseph Mengele, Nuremberg Code violating monster. You damn monster. See our little cancer proteins like that.
All right, first let's do the couple of funny parts of the video and then we'll talk about what a monster Alex Jones actually is. And then we'll go back to his fertility problems. Number one, a lot of people are saying it was like a little sleight of hand there. He didn't actually take it.
Yeah, Brett has it in slow-mo. Let's watch it because
watch.
I just can't get enough of Alex Jones. Let's go. Okay, there's the pill. We see it on the desk.
No, that might be part of the wrapping.
No, that's the pill. The wrapping's in his hand.
It might have been a piece of the wrapping. Anyways, we're gonna see if, I don't know that we're gonna see it perfectly, which hand he has it in, but it is curious that he's got a closed fist like an amateur magician there. Okay, which hand does he have it in? Which hand does he have it in? God damn, he's taking a while in slow motion. Oh, did he throw it away? We don't know. Do you see the pill in his hand? Do you see the pill on his left hand that he's theoretically gonna take and put in his mouth? Never saw the pill. Interesting. By the way, you're not supposed to take him that often. So it's possible he took it before and now he was doing this for show.
Look,
it's possible he never took it.
I have no problem with Alex Jones taking ivermectin. Take as much ivermectin as humanly possible, okay? I have a problem with him pushing ivermectin and convincing his audience members to take it when it's not a COVID. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the problem with the people pushing ivermectin is that it's very unlikely that they themselves are taking ivermectin. That's the problem.
Yeah, and so, and then he brings out his Perrier. Lots of funny moments there. Anyways, so Look, guys, it's really simple concept, but apparently some fans of Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, Jimmy Dore can't understand this simple concept. They're like, it's pre-approved for humans. If you have a parasitic infection, which to be fair, Alex Jones might have a lot of parasites. Maybe that's what's affecting his brain. So if you have that, you should take ivermectin based on what your doctor tells you. But that's not COVID. It has nothing to do with COVID. It's like saying a chemotherapy approved for humans. It's approved for humans. Yeah, we know that, but if you don't have cancer, chemotherapy is probably not the right thing to do. But they're like, well, I had a headache, so I got chemo. Why? Why'd you do that? That's really weird. Why'd you tell your audience to do that? When no doctor thinks that you should take it for COVID, they think that you should take it if you have tapeworm. So what a bizarre thing to do. And the person who wrote this at Wonka made a great point. Robin Panacea, I want to give her credit for that. So she said, there's this whole conspiracy theory that they're using the vaccine to depopulate the earth and kill everybody by putting something in the vaccine that either kills you immediately or in the long run, right? Why did they bother? Why not? They're like, okay, they invented the disease so that you could take the vaccine, which would kill you. Why wouldn't they just invent the disease that kills you? They already did that. Why would they bother coming out with the vaccine? Why not just kill people with a disease? But nobody ever asked the second question. That's what's amazing about Alex Jones's audience. They just get like that, well, aha, they did that to do this. And they never give it a second thought, not at all. And so now the new twist on the ivermectin causing issues with infertility and motility, etc. I mean, that's got such a great spin on it. And we were joking about it, I think, last week, and now it turns out it's true. Okay. By the way, the vaccine does nothing about your sperm count.
It doesn't impact your fertility
at all. No. At all. They did studies on it, and so ivermectin affects livestock fertility and apparently human fertility, right? Including lower sperm count, etc., and the viscosity, if you're worried about that. I'm amused by these guys who think they're manly men. Yeah. They're like, I'll tell you what. Well, I'm not taking that vaccine. It's gonna do something. Well, I can't mess around with that. And it turns out, oops, you are.
It's just, look, I mean, we could keep talking about it. I just feel like at this point, we've said everything we needed to say. I did a lengthy segment on Jacobin to show how people are literally making money off of pushing this drug, which is not effective for COVID. And we can keep sharing the evidence, but the kind of response that we're likely to get from the people who seem to be grifting off of this is people like Jimmy Dore. He's still pushing it, right? So he's not listening, he doesn't care. And over the weekend, he had a tweet. There he is. That's Jimmy Dore reacting to this evidence, does not care at all. So he writes-
Doesn't he look like that all the time now?
He looks worse, actually. He writes, so is penicillin a horse drug too? Because there's a horse version of it. Why don't you take 2 seconds and Google WHO Essential Medicines ivermectin or not, and then you can keep mindlessly repeating anti-science propaganda about ivermectin fed to you by establishment. Suit yourself. He has the same talking points that he recycles to fit in the context of anything that he's discussing, right? This is the establishment, right? The establishment is behind a vaccine that's saving people's lives. Okay, but don't worry, he is definitely doing a solid for Merck, which, by the way, Merck specifically, that's the pharmaceutical company that came up with ivermectin as a drug. They have released a statement saying, don't take ivermectin for COVID. It does not help treat COVID. It does not help to prevent COVID. In fact, this could actually be damaging to your health. Doesn't care, continues pushing it. Because hey, I honestly don't know what Jimmy Dore or Alex Jones's motives are for pushing it, really. But I do know that there are groups of people like America's Frontline Doctors who literally make money. They collect fees off of this telemedicine scam to get people prescriptions of ivermectin.
So I think that Jones and Dore are running the same scam. Don't trust anyone but me, okay?
Yeah.
So don't use your mind, hey, it's pre-approved for humans. For what? Do you have a cold? Do you have cancer? Do you have coronavirus? What is it approved for? Just because something's approved doesn't mean you can take it for any. Don't you guys know that? Everybody knows that, right? But apparently not. They just make facile points like that, and they're always like, yeah, pre-approved, take it. Who cares? Who cares what it's for? Take it, right? And so just any outrage against the establishment. But if the establishment does something terrible like endless wars, you should rail against it. If they're against Green New Deal, Medicare for all, you should rail against it. If they do something positive like get a vaccine that saves millions of lives, why would you be against that? Unless that's your racket. Your racket is, I'm against the establishment, and I don't care what the issue is. I don't care if they're right or wrong, and I don't care about the facts. Anything to gin up hatred and fear and anger, because that's what pays the bills at the Dore residence and the Jones residence. Now, look, Jimmy Dore said to threaten the safety of progressives and go to their house and stuff. Progressives, and so he's also done terrible things along those lines. But Alex Jones, obviously worse. That clip was unacceptable. I mean, it's funny to see him act like a lunatic. Yes, we're all used to that. But saying that Fauci and Bill Gates are murderers and demons, and somebody should do something about it.
I know it's everybody.
It's Alex Jones 101, but he's gonna get people killed. He's a super dangerous guy. The only thing that silver lining here is apparently now his sperm doesn't work. So, hey, at least there'll be less Alex Jones in the world.
All right, let's talk about the recall election in California. Larry Elder is the front runner. Larry Elder is the front runner if Gavin Newsom is voted to be recalled. Now, this is a problem because he's a little crazy, and recently he was on Candace Owens' show to talk a little bit about his thoughts on reparations for the slave owners.
The UK was ahead of us. They were. Do you know that the slave owners were compensated? After they lost their quote unquote property, the government compensated slave owners.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so when people talk about reparations, do they really want to have that conversation? Because like it or not, slavery was legal. And so their property, their legal property was taken away from them after the Civil War. So you can make an argument that the people that are owed reparations, and not only just black people, but also the people whose quote property, close quote, was taken away after the end of the Civil War.
But the slave owners did get paid by the government after they, emancipated slaves. So I don't understand what point he's trying to make, other than appeal to awful racists in the country, right? Like, let's not talk about reparations, because if we do talk about reparations, then we'll have a conversation about paying the slave owners. But the slave owners did get paid.
Yeah.
The people who were exploited, who were tortured, brutalized, forced to work for free, they didn't get anything. I mean, it's just okay.
Yeah. So it's called District of Columbia Emancipation Act. It was in 1862, and it applied to the District of Columbia, but it was really important as a national precedent. And they paid slave owners $300 for every slave after they were emancipated in the district, okay? So the slave owners did get reparations in that context. In the UK, they paid 20 million pounds overall to the slave owners to compensate them for taking their property. But now the most important point, let's remember that the property they're referring to was human beings. So for example, there's 1,000 horrific things that happen in slavery, snatching away people's babies and selling them off, quite literally, right? And whippings, etc. But one of the things that happened that people don't talk about because it's so horribly uncomfortable is rape. So what they're saying is, well, look, that was my property and I was busy raping it, and now I don't get to rape it anymore or have it work for free or both most of the time. And so you owe me money because now I'm not going to get to use her body to rape anymore. And that's Larry Elder, an African American, making that point. Candace Owens saying that's a brilliant point. I mean, we got to compensate them. Why don't we compensate the slave owners? Guys, for God's sake, man, is there no bounds to how much you'll sell out? How gross you are?
No, there is no bounds. Obviously, there are no bounds.
Yeah, but no actual reparations for African Americans, but poor white folks who own slaves, and couldn't use them for anything that they wanted anymore. I mean, you're going to miss out on the fun of whippings and all that stuff, and they're not even compensating white people for that. Larry Elder and Candace Owens complain on behalf of the worst people in America because this is their racket. This is how they get paid. Because white right-wing racists love Larry Elder, they love Candace Owens, they finance their whole careers, just say terrible things about black people, and we'll pay you. And they go, yes, sir, thank you, sir. And they tell you the slave owners should have been paid, but not the people who were freed, because they're disgusting. That guy's leading now in California. Okay, congratulations, Democratic Party, you're so brilliant at politics. Okay. We got to take well, not a break, but the show's over for non-members. Members, we got a great episode, including 2 more amazing stories for you there. TYT.com/join or hit the join button below on YouTube. Members, we'll see you in a minute. Well, the Young Turks, the Friday show is gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it. We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of it, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views.
Voice Award winner, News and Information Channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? For those of you watching on live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
Haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. It was definitely the one against Fox. I told you we were coming.
When you talk about it when it becomes a problem, our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America. Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
TikTok, TikTok.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
TikTok, TikTok.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy.
TikTok. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. TikTok. And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country. November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
Back to back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
like this.
It's not human intelligence!
All right, back on a bonus episode for our awesome members. We got a couple of fun stories for you guys.
I don't know how fun this is for right-wingers, but QAnon followers on Telegram are unfortunately being duped by fake celebrity accounts that are trying to sell items that are worthless to them. So what's going on? Well, first let's back up. What is Telegram? It's the social media platform for the right wing, right? The whole point is, we don't want censorship, we need our own thing, and so Telegram emerged. Now, here's what the scam is. The scam preys on conspiracy theorists by drawing them in with promises that secret information regarding corruption and pedophilia in Hollywood will soon be released. Yet once each Telegram channel builds a significant following, users are instead met with an increasing number of posts about gold and silver coins featuring former President Donald Trump. Which, like, I can't think of anything I'd want less, right? Like the coin thing. And it's not just the Trump thing. Like, the coins have been around for a while, okay? Listen, the coins are worthless. Stop collecting them, throw them away. All right.
No, I hear it's going up to $400.
Like,
this is almost like Bitcoin, Anna. Okay.
The freaking coin collectors, like,
because it's such a tight market, and that's why you gotta act now, right?
Sit down.
By the way, so this is what they say in their plugs. It's literally in this story, right? And what I love is that they're pretending to be Mel Gibson and Sylvester Stallone. So we'll explain that in a second. But I like that Mel Gibson's hawking like 400 these coins. Oh, the Trump coins, man. I didn't make enough money in what was it?
Passion of the Christ.
Passion of the Christ, right? He made like $1 gazillion on that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make $20 more off this Trump coin. Okay. But they're saying, oh, it's like Bitcoin, except it isn't. It's just a coin. It's just literally just a coin. And they just throw Bitcoin in there to give it the appearance that this value is going to go up. And they're like, this could go up to $400. I suppose anything could, right? But it's not like it's limited supply. They're selling them everywhere.
Yeah. So you mentioned Mel Gibson, and Mel Gibson is unfortunately being used to scam these people. He just doesn't know it. One of the most popular accounts is Mel Gibson Official, because hey, if you put official in the title, in the handle, it must be real. Which has amassed over 30,000 subscribers since launching in March. The account spent its first few months sharing posts praising Trump before switching to QAnon-themed topics regarding elite child-eating pedophilia rings, very specific. Now here's an example of one of the posts coming from this particular page or account. Hollywood is drenched in innocent children's blood. Jesus. The references to pedophilia and cannibalism have always been there, but for years, they're cryptic or symbolic. The account wrote last month, I was introduced to these practices in the early 2000s and was threatened with serious repercussions should I ever speak out. And I don't just mean my career, I mean my life was threatened. My family's life would be in danger. And then, that was followed with, all right, so here's another post. Donald Trump is the real reason why the liberal elites almost show their true final form. The levels of their known and unknown crimes, intrigues, and manipulations only prove that President Trump is a real lion. And then it asks you to click on that link, official Telegram channel. Users were encouraged to subscribe to the official accounts for Stallone, Eastwood, and even deceased figures such as Michael Jackson and John F. Kennedy Jr. A link to purchase the official Trump coins redirects to a web shop for the website Raw Conservative Opinions. The coins are listed as free, with users allegedly only having to pay for shipping and handling. And so that's where they probably make their money. It's like, the coin is free, you're getting a deal, but shipping and handling is $55.
Yeah. I mean, but Anna, here they go up to 400.
They could totally, yeah.
It's like Bitcoin because it's a coin and you have to part with a bit of your money.
Are you kidding me? Our grandchildren are gonna be clamoring for those Trump coins.
Oh yeah.
Clamoring.
Okay, so, but if you think about it, it's actually a logical scam. Because if you were gonna try to find rubes, where would you go? Let's be honest, you go to the right wing.
The people who've been scammed by the Trump administration over and over and over again?
Yeah, the people who thought, well, maybe we put bleach into our bodies, see what happens. Maybe it's horse paste, I don't know. Okay, well, I know I don't believe all the world's scientists, and I know I don't believe all the world's doctors, but I'll believe any rando online. Those are the guys you would target. Because they'll believe anything online, right? They'll believe anything as long as it doesn't make sense. Now, guys, think about it. If I saw Bernie Sanders official and it said, I've uncovered, let's say, Trump's baby eating scandal, what would I do? I'd be a little skeptical that Bernie Sanders said that.
Yeah,
I would Google it because he's kind of a famous person, and I would find a real article where, is that a real quote or is that not a real quote? But no, ain't nobody gonna double check on Telegram.
No, you just said something. I just had a very important realization, okay? If someone can't, look, I hate Donald Trump, okay? I can't stand the guy. If anyone came to me and said, Anna, Donald Trump is eating babies, I'd be like, go see a doctor. There's something wrong with you, too much horse paste. Like, I just, but that's the thing, right? Like, I don't just believe whatever is said about my political opponents or those I disagree with. Like, if someone came to me with that accusation, I'd be like, can you show me evidence for that? Or why do you think that? Is there something that happened that you can point me to that would help corroborate this accusation? But the right wing is like, oh no, baby eating, baby pedophilia, like all this insane stuff. Like, they'll believe anything if it has to do with their political opponents.
It's amazing because they'll say, all the world's scientists say that climate change is real and caused by man. I don't believe them. All the world's doctors say, take the vaccine so you don't die from coronavirus. I don't believe them. Rando says that guy's eating babies. I obviously believe him right away. Right away, I believe him, right? And so if you're gonna run a scam, who would you run it on? Of course you'd run it on those people. That if it comes from an official source, there's no way in the world they'll believe it, which means they can't double check you anyway. And if it comes from a rando, they'll believe it in a second.
Totally.
It's a gold mine for scam artists and con men, right? And then you think they're gonna double check to make sure Mel Gibson said it? They're not gonna double check. And then the last part of it is, since it's a BS conservative website, they got no rules, no verifications, no nothing. So you can call Mel Gibson official all day long and nobody's gonna care. Right? Hey, we told you, man, this is sites for idiots. We don't do any stupid verification. We let anybody say anything they want. It's called free speech. You got robbed? Hey, well, it's not free to you because it's the robbery. But basically, they told you, and so you went for the scams. So and now you're staying for the scams.
Whatever.
It's just different scams.
Let them buy the coins.
Yeah, I don't care at all.
I don't care at all.
Like, and is anybody gonna follow up? And besides which, the right wing is above the law. Do you think any prosecutors are gonna follow up on this? No. It's just the right wing can break the law all day long in America. So, and as long as they're robbing each other, I frankly don't care. I mean, you want to give away your good hard-earned money that you barely can, survive on to obvious con men? What am I gonna do with you? We try to help.
All right, we do have some good news though. It's an update on a story that we talked about last week. So let's discuss. Let me fix my hair, make sure the clip comes out okay.
All right, that is very important.
All right, so earlier we shared a story regarding a judge in Ohio who had ordered a hospital in the state to administer ivermectin to one of its coronavirus patients. Well, that ruling has been reversed in a subsequent decision by another judge. And that judge basically said what I think makes complete sense. If ivermectin is not meant to treat coronavirus patients, then the hospital has the right to deny that drug to one of its patients. In an 11-page decision, Hamilton County Common Pleas Judge Michael Oster Jr. wrote that there was no doubt that the medical and scientific communities do not support the use of ivermectin as a treatment for COVID-19. He also writes, while this court is sympathetic to the plaintiff, the wife of the patient, and understands the idea of wanting to do anything to help her loved one, public policy should not and does not support allowing physicians to try any type of treatment on human beings, he wrote. So this is a good reversal because, again, and I feel awful for this man's wife because she is desperate. She's trying to do anything and everything possible to save her husband. He's in a terrible state right now in the hospital. But at the same time, the hospital would be forced to administer a drug that would not help his condition in the least bit because ivermectin is meant for parasitic infections in the intestines. It is not a treatment for COVID, which is a virus that impacts the respiratory system.
Okay, so meanwhile today, Joe Rogan is saying that maybe you should sue CNN for saying that he's taking horse dewormer because he's taking human dewormer.
Oh, that makes it better.
Yeah,
okay.
Joe, congratulations, you nailed it. Do you have worms in your stomach? Is that what you have? If you do, then you should definitely take ivermectin and consult your doctor first, right? But if you don't, at best you're wasting your time. Earlier in the show, we did the story about how it might actually affect your sperm and your fertility in a negative way. And by the way, so does COVID. The only thing that doesn't is the vaccine, but that's all the world's doctors, so what would they know? And Rogan says, well, I found a rando doctor in Texas, and he says it's okay. And this couple here said, well, we found a rando doctor online, and they suggested it. And so this case is about the hospital saying, no, we've got hundreds of doctors that work here. None of them think that this is the right medicine for this disease.
Right.
So the courts, you cannot make us give him the wrong medicine. It doesn't make sense. And so we understand, and we told you this last week, why the first judge ruled the way that he did. He's like, well, he's trying to respect their rights to have their doctor prescribe something to them. But the hospital is saying you got to respect our rights too.
Right.
This is a rando doctor online, and you're telling real doctors, and that doctor, by the way, is making a lot of money off of selling ivermectin for something that it's not prescribed for,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
But you're telling all of us real doctors here in the hospital to ignore it and do harm to our patient. And it could do some harm depending on the dosage, depending on how you take it, etc. And guys, come on, it's such a simple concept. Please don't be simple like these talk show hosts. Well, you could use it for humans, but for what? For what? There's nothing wrong with Advil, but you shouldn't just say, okay, I took Advil, so my cancer's cured. That makes no sense.
Yeah, look, it's the same drug, right? It's just that for livestock, it's a higher dose because it's a bigger animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, yeah, it's not like, oh, it's not just for livestock, it's for humans too. You're right, Cenk. Okay, but do you have a parasitic infection? Because if you don't, and you're worried about COVID or you're trying to treat COVID, it's not gonna help with that. There's no evidence to suggest it, period. So anyway, it's just, it's crazy. Like the thing that blows my mind is that Joe Rogan fell for it, that he fell for it.
And now he's out there defending it.
Look, I think that's a very human reaction, right? Because what, you want to, he knows he looks stupid. So I think he's getting super defensive. I don't know, it blows my mind that he really thinks, he genuinely bought it. He genuinely thinks that ivermectin, which impacts your intestine. Cenk, people are pooping the lining of their intestines.
Yeah.
Because of so people are pooping themselves.
To death.
Almost to death, yeah.
Yeah, if you take a high enough dosage, that's why the poison centers are getting so many calls. Because some people are not taking the human version, they're taking the literal horse version of it, which of course is knocking them out in a lot of ways. And then some idiots look at their remains afterwards, after their intestine gets flushed out, and they're saying, oh, maybe I see coronavirus in there. No, you don't. No, you don't. You see the lining of your intestines. Okay, and think about how insane this is. I'm not going to trust all the doctors in the world. I'm going to trust Joe Rogan instead. Okay, we're rando talk show hosts online. We always tell you, go check with an actual doctor, go check with your doctor, go check with all the doctors in your local hospital, right? And they're like, nope, I think Jimmy Dore knows better.
Okay, cool.
Okay, God help you. God help you. No, if Alex Jones and Jimmy Dore and Joe Rogan all agree, could all the doctors in the world be wrong? No, the answer is no. They don't know all better than all the doctors in the world. You'd be nuts to think that. And unfortunately, a lot of people do think that. So, yeah. And I'm glad Joe's better. He had COVID and he got better and he's in good shape and he did the other things right. He took real medicine too. Right. But now he's on the show today talking about how, well, I got better real quick, so it must have worked. No, that's not how it works. The other medicine could have helped, right? Now you're misleading people and they're gonna say, oh, I don't know, all these stinking doctors went to medical school, don't know nothing. Joe got better quick. Ay.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened. Like I don't get it. By the way, when they see stuff in their, their poo, some of them think that they're like, oh, turns out maybe I did have a parasitic infection. Like they think that it's like they're pooping out parasites. It's just there's so many self-owns on the internet these days. Like
it destroyed my intestinal tract to own the libs.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, but did you own the libs? Did you? Anyway, all right.
All right, so we're done with that story.
We are done with that story.
So, so I'll go on, but not related. But it's Rogan adjacent. Okay. No, it's actually about Rogan. It's just that story adjacent.
Okay.
I was thinking, has he had a real left winger on in years?
I mean,
so he had Bernie on. Yeah. And he endorsed Bernie. So I always go back to that for he's not insane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he had him on during the thing. But since then he's had fake liberals on, fake leftists on, and all saying, "Oh, the right wing's right, right wing's right. Oh my God, Joe, you're so right. Just keep on having right wing hosts and us, just us, right?" So it's not, guys.
I don't think that he's. I don't know. Some people get mad at me for saying this. They think I'm giving him too much benefit of the doubt. Whatever. It is what it is. I don't think that he's a bad or evil person like Jimmy Dore is. I think Jimmy Dore is just downright evil. Anyway, but Joe Rogan is childlike in how impressionable he is, right? And so if he's just booking right winger after right winger after right winger after right winger, like nonstop on his podcast, he becomes a product of his environment, right?
Yeah.
And so, when Jimmy was actually on his podcast fairly recently, and he's like, oh, I got the vaccine and I've got stiff neck. I mean, sure, it has nothing to do with the spinal condition he has, nothing to do with that. But he's saying that the vaccine gave him stiff. So like Joe Rogan's sitting there with this like childlike impressionable characteristic or trait, and he's just absorbing all this stuff, and like he genuinely believes it. He believes it. Like he's not a scammer. I don't think he's an evil dude. Like he genuinely has been propagandized into believing that the vaccine is more harmful against COVID compared to a drug for parasitic infections. Yeah. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, so look, a lot of people are trying to get on Joe's show, and so there's like this stupid like competition over that. I'm gonna just assure you guys that we don't give a shit.
Obviously, I just called him childlike.
Yes, I mean, as I think you might be able to tell. But I'm telling you, so you don't think like, oh, you should have real leftists on. So you guys are trying to get on or something. I don't care at all. You have no idea how well things are going. For like Rashad is killing it, for example. Killing it. Okay, watch Indisputable. Apparently everybody else is. So everything is going along pretty good. So this is about really Rogan losing his relevance. Because if all you're doing is turning into a right-wing echo chamber, well, that's not interesting at all. That's actually super boring.
Does this happen to everybody? Like, it's not just about Rogan. I've noticed a lot of people, like they peak, right? And then things start to go downhill. And then, I don't know, things start to get a little crazy, on their way out.
Well, I don't know. Rogan always had a crazy, at least streak in him. Because remember, he used to be friends with Alex Jones forever, right?
Oh, they're still friends.
I know.
No, yeah.
And then Alex Jones, by the way, at one point threatened his life, and then Joe went and kissed his ass afterwards.
Yeah,
that happened. Let's keep it real. That definitely happened.
Okay, but it's not just about Rogan. I mean, here's another example. Even though we never really agreed with him politically, Giuliani's another example, right? Giuliani, like, dude, like, get out while you're ahead. What are you doing?
Yeah, he could have just left as America's mayor or whatever.
Right.
And absolutely pulverized his reputation, apparently his money, everything. And now he's begging Trump for money and Trump won't give it to him because he's Trump. And so, I mean, he might as well pooped out his intestines.
Oh my God.
Rudy's in a, now by the way, everybody's punking him on Cameo. Everybody's going on Cameo, getting Julia.
He's on Cameo, guys.
Come on,
He
man.
was America's mayor. Now he's on Cameo. Like.
Yeah, here, I'll give you more random adjacent things. Donald Trump Jr. is on Cameo. Guys, there ain't no family that's worth $1 billion where the heir apparent is doing videos for $300, for $50, $500. It doesn't matter.
No.
Nobody, Bill Gates' son is not doing Cameo for $300.
Dude, no. That might be the most devastating point you've ever made in your entire life. Okay.
Oh, okay, well. Maybe.
No, that was, but it's so true. What are you doing on Cameo? Like, why is Donald Trump Jr. on Cameo? You guys are billionaires?
Billionaires.
We're billionaires. Okay, get punked on Cameo. Come on.
Yeah, sure, billionaires.
Hey guys, for the low price of $25, I'll say hi to your friends. Like.
Yeah. And remember how good we are at business.
Yeah.
I heard they're selling the Trump Hotel in DC. I hope somebody gets a good bargain basement price on that. Anyways, so back to Rogan just to finish the thought. Like now it's turned into like a kind of like a low wattage Tucker Carlson show. So it used to be an interesting populist show, and now it's the same guests as Tucker has on. Bunch of right wingers and a bunch of left wingers or pretend left wingers who'll say the right wing's right about everything. So there's no exchange of ideas. And in the beginning there was. Like that's why Rogan was interesting for a while.
I used to listen to Rogan's podcast. Like I would listen to every episode. And then a few years ago, it just became super repetitive. When he'd have the right wingers on, it's not like I preferred it, right? But I still listened because every once in a while there would be an interesting point made, or I think it's important to know like the perspectives of people you disagree with, right? So I still enjoyed listening because I'm like, oh, so that's why they think X, Y, and Z. They're wrong, but whatever, you know? And then it just became too repetitive. Like aren't trans pronouns so annoying? It's like, yeah, I know, I got it. You don't like the trans pronouns. Like this is now the 1028th episode where you guys are talking to. Can we let's get something new, something fresh, you know? Or like, some right winger who wanted to talk about skull sizes and why black people are inherently inferior. Like it was, I just couldn't, I wanted something else. And it became less interesting, super repetitive. And the only thing that gave it a little bit of diversity was like, all right, I'm gonna mix in some like topics regarding workouts and MMA stuff, which I have no interest in whatsoever. Right? Yeah.
So by the way, I might be missing it. I never listen to anybody else's show. It's not a knock on anybody. I just don't have time. But I have not seen a prominent left winger on there in forever. Only fake left wingers. So that's super boring and inauthentic. The whole thing was supposed to be about authenticity, right? Oh, you don't want normal politicians on because they're not authentic. Then you have Tulsi Gabbard on, who's the least authentic person you've ever met. But she's populist. Is she? But and there you have it. I mean, so a lot of fake populists now, and so well, it is what it is. I mean, but a lot of these shows, they're like you said, they arc, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Bill Maher, hot mess, right?
Yeah.
But to HBO executives, they're like, oh, Maher's still got it. He's hot. You know. They think he's cutting edge. They're like, oh, he's willing to take on liberals too.
Yeah.
No one else in the media will take on the left.
No,
really?
Amazing.
Have you seen any of the media? Okay, but they still think that. They still think, oh my God, Mars nailing it, right?
Yeah.
And oh look, he'll take on anybody. So, but you know what? And I'll leave it on this. I guess we're almost out of time. Wozniak is next. The one thing that unites all of them, everybody I just mentioned, they all hate Muslims. Okay, every host, every guest of Joe Rogan, that's way too broad because Anna and I were also guests like a million years ago. But certainly in the last couple of years, it feels like hates Muslims. And he loves people who hates Muslims, right? Sam Harris, Dave Rubin, oh God damn it. Tulsi Gabbard.
Falling out. He had a little bit, yeah. Tulsi Gabbard, yes.
Hates Muslims,
He did have a falling out with Dave Rubin.
Yeah, over the post office.
Right, no, even, yeah, after that, after it became like abundantly clear that he said some stuff about Dave Rubin on his show, about how like, he's not who he claims to be and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro hates Muslims. Bill Maher hates Muslims. So if you hate Muslims, you're gonna have a good career in media in America. Because in American media, who doesn't frame Muslims as Islamic radicals who only understand violence and need to be attacked before their dastardly ways leads them to attacking us? That's mainstream media 101. It ain't brave. Whatever it is, it ain't brave at all. And that's the low-level crap that Rogan and Maher are doing these days. And they both used to be interesting broadcasters. So, oh well. All right, twitch.tv/TYT. Woz is super fun. Go check him out now. See you guys tomorrow.
Bye-bye.